era of football. Est video is purement para entretenimiento y no infringe derechos de autor en Los derechos de la novela y la imagen son del autor original, no reclamamos propiedad. No te gusta esperar y quieres escuchar este fanfic completo ahora? Suscríbete a nuestro Patreon, donde encontrarás los mejores fanfics. Chapter 876. Expanding again. 3 goals, so scary. Someone sighed. Fifan's current strength is really outstanding. Whether in terms of strength or performance, Corning, which is only slightly inferior to the top 3 this year, was ahead of Fifan by 3 goals shortly after the start of the second half. Such performance really makes people feel trembling. But in fact, although Fifan is excellent, it is far from being so excellent. They can have such a performance, which is more related to the fact that they have exhausted all their efforts in the previous games. Although in terms of lineup, they seem to be more calm and constantly rotate to maintain the energy of most players. In fact, several core players have paid more. This is also normal. It is normal for the core to pay more, but compared with the efforts of others, Zheng Qi's efforts are more. He participated in several important no's. In fact, if it were not for his continuous efforts, Fifan would not be ahead by 3 goals. Zheng Qi's outstanding performance made his teammates happy, but also a little worried, because Zheng Qi paid too much during this period, and such an overdraft may not be a good thing. However, Zheng Qi himself knew that after taking a 3-goal lead, he immediately asked to be replaced and have a good rest off the court. Seeing that Zheng Qi seemed to have already planned it out, the Fifan players were relieved. After all, Zheng Qi looked like a laughing man, but he was actually very thoughtful. He would not suffer any loss if he planned it out. After taking a 3-goal lead, Fifan could play more easily. Because they were not afraid of mistakes, they were more relaxed. They tried to delay time as much as possible in defense and suppress their opponent's offense. In short, they had to maintain the 3-goal lead. Fifan's ability to control the situation was still very good. They controlled the situation on the court very well. Although Corning broke through the door in the next defense, they quickly suppressed Corning through a step-by-step offensive advancement and expanded their lead to 3 goals again. Corning was indeed very tenacious. They quickly launched a counter-attack. This time they played a beautiful tactical coordination and quickly broke through Fifan's defense line, narrowing the score to 2 goals. In the next defense, they also had a very beautiful defensive tactic. After resisting Fifan's attack, they found an opportunity to use a wave of skills to focus fire and let the football refresh. After refreshing, they also got the ball first. Fifan's players began to return to defense, and Corning also launched an attack. If they can seize the opportunity in this attack, then the disadvantage will be reduced to 1 goal. Although there are only more than 10 minutes left in the second half, the game has entered the most chaotic time, and the possibility of scoring is much greater than the previous game. Corning and Fifan's players are clear about this. The last 15 minutes are the time for the real decisive battle. Although Fifan once pulled the score apart, Corning's players still narrowed the score again through tenacious impact. Although they were still 2 goals behind, they had the advantage of attacking, so it was not uncommon to reduce the score to 1 goal. Seeing this, the fans were shocked to find that the huge advantage of the overlord team with 3 goals in the lead did not seem to be that huge. We were only 2 goals ahead. Zheng Qi muttered, and then stood up. He was not panicked at the moment. Maybe some of Fifan's players were a little panicked at this time, but he was not panicked at all. In the nearly 20 minutes just now, he had been resting off the court, and Shinranofei and others also took turns to play. Often there was only one person on the court, that is, in most of the substitutes, Fifan still entangled Can. Although the score was pulled close, their main players got a good rest. What about Can? Their main players have been fighting on the court. Now Fifan is qualified to see further. They don't need to worry about the temporary situation, but can see further. What is the long term? The long term is to look at the overall game. Can has taken some advantages now, but in the last 15 minutes, their main players will suffer a big loss because of too much consumption. Zheng Qi came on the court, and Fifan's main players also came on the court. They had rested enough before, and they could also concentrate in the last 15 minutes. The players of Corning began to show their fighting spirit. Although they had consumed a lot of energy on the court, their state and fighting spirit did not decline due to fatigue. On the contrary, they exuded a better state and fighting spirit because of fatigue at this time. This state will certainly not last too long, but it played a great role in this attack. In their series of cooperation, Fifan's defense line fell to the ground. Corning's players forcibly broke through Fifan's defense line, and then resisted Fifan's fierce attack from both wings, and scored the first goal. When Chang'e sent the ball into Fifan's goal, 8 of the 10 people including Yuan Shao who were protecting her behind her had died. It seemed that they would be wiped out in one more second. However, before that, they completed the established tactical task. One more goal. Such a drastic change made Corning's fans shout wildly. This is what they want to see. Even if they're 3 goals behind, they will never give up. Although they are still 1 goal behind, and although their players have already overdrawn a lot of energy at this moment, the change from 3 goals behind to only 1 goal behind is enough to make their fighting spirit even stronger. You know, in such an important game, fighting spirit is enough to make them persist to the end. Are you under pressure? Zheng Qi asked Shinryu with a smile after he came on the court. Shinryu ignored him. It's really ruthless. Zheng Qi sighed. These 2 inexplicable sentences immediately calmed down the Fifan players. Zheng Qi still had the mind to talk nonsense, which means that there will be no problem in this game, right? In fact, it is true. For Fifan, they are still 1 goal ahead and have the opportunity to attack. In Zheng Qi's view, the lead is still 2 goals. In the last 15 minutes of the game, although the field will be more chaotic, the Fifan players, or their core state, are better, and their attention is more focused, so they will naturally have more advantages in the game. Although there is also an element of luck in the game, as long as you don't care, you won't worry about any problems with luck. Luck can only influence some advantages, but it will not be a decisive factor. The real decisive factor is still in your hands. Fifan launched a counter-attack, and Corning, who had the last fighting spirit, began their interception. If they can stop Fifan's attack this time, they will have a great chance to tie the score and drag the game into overtime, or even surpass Fifan. If they can't resist it, the game will be a little difficult. Such a situation certainly seems a little unfair, but it is not unfair at all. Fifan's advantage is also obtained through their efforts. Fifan launched a fierce attack, and Corning began to intercept tenaciously. Now the main forces of both sides are on the court, and this is the moment of the decisive battle. With courage, Corning has been blocking Fifan since the midfield, and Fifan's fierce attack has been continuously launched, gradually compressing Corning's defense line. The flames kept popping up randomly, and each time they popped up, there would be some gaps in the impeccable defenses of both sides. How to avoid the fireworks of one's own side while attacking the gaps of the other side was an extremely huge test. When a ball of fireworks popped up from under his feet, Shinryu suddenly moved forward several yards, just avoiding the damage of the fireworks. At the same time, his skills did not stop for a moment, but rushed directly to Corning's defense line. There, Chang'e also happened to avoid a flame on the ground, but when she just raised her head, Shinryu's attack appeared in front of her. Chang'e could only retreat. Shinryu was unyielding and rushed into Corning's defense line. Corning's defense quickly moved at this moment. They began to split into 2 parts, one to encircle Shinryu, and the other to block the extraordinary receiving players. At this time, Bin Shikai moved. He quickly cut into Corning's formation from another angle. Because of the change in the center of gravity just now, the center of gravity of Corning's defense line shifted at that moment. If it was in front of their own goal, there would be no problem. However, now they are entangled with Fifan in the midfield, after being inserted by Bin Shikai from the flank. Corning's defense line was a little messy. After all, although they are still playing very well now, their energy is indeed overdrawn. It is difficult to be comprehensive in the game, and Bin Shikai is a player who is good at catching loopholes in such situations. Therefore, Bin Shikai's shot made Corning's defense line a little messy, and other players quickly responded to Shinryu and directly made a center bloom. Originally, Corning could still support it, but Zheng Qi, who had been invisible before, completed his task again. He appeared next to Corning's auxiliary core and took him away with a set of combos. It's me again, Corning's auxiliary core is about to cry out of grievance. It's not that she has never been targeted before, but she was targeted and died so quickly. How can people not feel extremely aggrieved? Not only was it a grievance, but Corning's defense, which was already in chaos, also lost its core support, so it naturally collapsed faster. Fifan's core players kept killing Corning's players, and then attacked all the way to Corning's goal, and then scored a goal. Expanding the lead again. Chapter 877. The possibility of exchange. Seeing Fifan expanding his lead again, all the players of the strong teams who were paying attention to this game knew that Corning had no chance in this game. Of course, Li Qing's had seen this long ago, and it seemed to show that Li Qing's was a little taller than them. Kanming's players were naturally unwilling to give up, but for Fifan, the current 2-goal advantage was enough for them to keep it until the end. What's more, Fifan's core players had no problem with their energy at the moment, but Kanming's core players were already a little tired. The more they played, the more likely they were to make mistakes. This was also that case. In the next attack, Kanming's players certainly worked hard, but in a terrain change, 3 of them failed to dodge in time and were taken away from the field by fireworks. Fifan would certainly not miss such an opportunity. They quickly completed the counter-attack. Although they failed to score, they took the initiative again. Seeing that there were only a few minutes left in the game, Kanming wanted to fight back and snatch the ball from Fifan's feet, but Fifan did not give them a chance. Fifan began to constantly dispatch attacks everywhere, constantly killing time. This style of play is a bit rogue, but everyone can understand that at such a critical moment, it is normal to be a bit rogue. Shameless, these shameless men. The players of Corning can only think so, but there is nothing they can do. They have tried their best in this game. You played well in this game. Yuan Shao kept his calm and said so when shaking hands with Zheng Qi. Ha ha ha, I'm a little lucky. Zheng Qi smiled hypocritically. And Nai Lili and Chang He, who were standing behind Yuan Shao, rolled their eyes at the same time. They didn't want to hide their dislike for this guy. Our season is over, and your season still has a long time. It's not so easy to get the 5 championships. Yuan Shao said meaningfully. It's not easy to get it, but you have to get it. Zheng Qi said it very seriously this time. Yuan Shao nodded, didn't say much, and turned to leave. This season that belongs to them has ended, and this season that belongs to Fifan still has a long way to go. The game is over. Fifan defeated Kanming and entered the finals with their heads held high. In the other semi-final, Zheng also easily defeated the opponent and will meet Fifan in the final. There are 4 rounds left in the league and 1 game left in the cup. After 5 games, whether Fifan can still challenge for the 5-time champion will be revealed. The commentator shouted excitedly. Defeating Kanming means that Fifan has crossed the last obstacle in the China Cup and stepped onto the stage of the final. Although it will be an extremely severe test against Zheng Qi, in short, they now have this opportunity. 2 championships have been won. In the next month, they will challenge the remaining 2 championships, and then in another month, they will challenge the last championship. This is Fifan's next schedule. In 2 months, if they can win 12 games, then the unprecedented 5-time champion will be theirs. Win 12 games, and no one can stop them. Only 12 games. It's very simple. Now we should regard ourselves as the bronze 5 little strong men, playing against the 12 palaces. Just beat them, it's very simple. Zheng Qi said after the game. The extraordinary players couldn't help but laugh. This metaphor is really very strange, but it seems to be somewhat appropriate. Some of the 12 zodiac signs were just sent over casually. Li Rui thought for a while and said, some of the next 12 games will be easy to play, the same idea. Zheng Qi explained. Li Rui nodded in satisfaction. Looking at these 2 people, the others were even more speechless. A strange question, Zheng Qi's strange answer. Surprisingly, they were so in sync. 3 days later is the 35th round of the game, so we won't give everyone a day off. After winning the Liho, we will have another day off. Zhu Shan said. The extraordinary players nodded. At this point in the game, no one would care about taking a day or 2 off. After not getting any owners, resting is not fun. If we don't make mistakes in the next league, there will be no problem. The real test is the cup final. Although Zheng Qi has fewer points than Tin He now, they are still our biggest opponent in a face-to-face competition. The players went to rest, but Zhu Shan could not rest. Instead, he started a discussion with Meng Fan. Specific tactics are your job. I'm not good at this. Meng Fan smiled. I can only play a mediocre role in this area now. Zheng Qi's command on the field is very good. Zhu Shan shook his head and smiled bigly. That's only in some situations. Most of the time, you still have to command. Even if Li Qing takes care of everything in Tin He, we can't underestimate Zhu Omen. His cooperation with Li Qing is the biggest key to Tin He's good results in recent years. Many people will ignore his role in this, but we shouldn't ignore it. Meng Fan shook his head and said to Zhu Shan. Zhu Shan knew what Meng Fan meant, just to prevent his confidence in himself from being shaken. In fact, he didn't waver. I will cooperate with Zheng Qi. After all, my command cannot be conveyed to the players immediately. I am very clear about this. Zhu Shan laughed. It's best to think this way. Zheng Qi does not have the ability to command the overall tactics. He is far behind Li Qing's in this aspect. He just has some wonderful ideas, but he is still far from connecting several small tactics together and integrating them into an overall tactic. His performance in the last game was more of luck. He just chased after other people's auxiliary. After playing more, the opponent paid more attention to the auxiliary, and there were flaws in other places. It's that simple. It's not a perfect tactic at all. Meng Fan said. But the final effect is similar. Zhu Shan laughed. Yes, the final effect is similar, but intentional and unintentional, it's far different. We can't always expect such coincidences to appear. Meng Fan said. Well, when we played against Changfeng, it was hard to imagine that we could do this tactically. Zhu Shan nodded. Yes, it works for Can 9, but not necessarily for Changfeng. Although Can 9 has performed well this year, their level is still far behind ours, especially in terms of controlling our core players. It is difficult for them to duel, so Zheng Qi's actions can be successful again and again. Can you imagine that when facing Changfeng, Zheng Qi can continue to kill their auxiliary core players? Meng Fan said. Yes, it will be difficult. Changfeng has many top players. At least Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing are both very strong. Zhu Shan nodded. The others are also very good. They have declined a bit overall this year, but in several games, they can still play at the top level without any problem. Meng Fan said. So in that game, we have to do our best in the details. Lu Xiaoxun is replaced by Shen Rufei. Do you think it is feasible? Zhu Shan asked. I think it's difficult. I'm not underestimating Shen Rufei's level. His current level is very close to Lu Xiaoxun, but being close and reaching are two different things. A player like Lu Xiaoxun will not be easily defeated. However, using Shen Rufei to confront Lu Xiaoxun head-on is a feasible approach. Even if we can't defeat him at all, defeating him by 80% is still a victory. Meng Fan said. Indeed, the threat of Lu Xiaoxun needs to be considered, but they also have Daixing, Zhu Shan said. Then there is no need to deal with him specifically. Liu Shibo can deal with him. Meng Fan said. Well, but it seems a little early to consider this now. In many cases during the game, we need to rely on the spot response. Zhu Shan said after thinking for a while. Our on-the-spot response depends on Zheng Qi. So in the game, if we make the opponent's strong players unable to take care of themselves, then Zheng Qi's on-the-spot response will be easier, don't you think? Meng Fan said with a smile. Ah, that's the truth. Zhu Shan felt like he had been enlightened. In such a game, it is necessary to look at the long term. If Shen Rufei can entangle Lu Xiaoxun and Liu Shibo can defend Daixing, then Zheng Qi's tactical adaptability will certainly be better demonstrated. If there are some problems with Changfeng's two strongest points, then Changfeng is more likely to reveal flaws. In this case, Bin Shikai characteristics will also be put to good use. In other words, in this way, Tifan's four core players can all be well played. In this game where the performance of the entire team depends on the performance of the core players, their performance will give Changfeng a considerable advantage. This is indeed a good idea. The next training can go in this direction, but in this way, Shen Rufei and Liu Shibo will have to pay more, and I don't know if they're willing. Zhu Shan thought for a while and said. No problem. Although these two guys are also very characterful, they will not refuse anything that is beneficial to victory. Meng Fan smiled slightly. Of course, Meng Fan is more accurate in judging people. So Zhu Shan announced that such training would be conducted during the second day's training. Shen Rufei and Liu Shibo did not show any objection. Such tactics would certainly reduce their chances of performance, but as the most important match, such sacrifices were certainly worth it. In the 4 league matches before the final, these 4 matches would be the best opportunity to practice these tactics. Although this would make the opponent wary, Tifan had no intention of playing tricks on the opponent. On the contrary, a fair victory would be more difficult to deal with. Chapter 878a. Steady team. If you want to hit the 5-time champion, you really have to pay more. The semi-final against Kenning was a tough battle, but after such a tough battle, they will soon face a league match. Although the opponents in the league are only newly promoted teams like Lihou and weak teams that are trying to relegation, Lihou has the upper hand in terms of energy. As a newly promoted team this year, Lihou's performance is not outstanding. In fact, the performance of the 3 newly promoted teams this year is not very good. Hong Yuan performed very well at the beginning, but after losing to Tianlong, they began to lose continuously and then their ranking dropped. Now they have dropped to 11th place. Although there is still no possibility of relegation, it is far from the glory of rushing to the top 6 before. It is far from the glory of rushing to the top 6 before. Yokwang, the most popular team in that first-class league, did not perform well. Now they are ranked 15th, 6 points ahead of the relegation zone. Although they are not completely out of danger, they have successfully relegated and are considered to be mediocre. Liho is unlucky. They are now ranked 18th, right in the relegation zone, and the possibility of relegation is very high. Now the 16th Jianmang has 37 points, 5 points ahead of Liho, and the possibility of relegation is very high. The 3 teams that will be relegated are most likely from Yushan with 33 points, Liho with 32 points, Yinshuan with 31 points, and Mingfeng with 28 points. 3 of these 4 teams will be relegated. It is cruel. For Liho, even if it is only 1 point now, they have to strive hard. At the last moment, they met a team like Fifan. Their luck is really bad, but they have a certain advantage in physical strength and energy, which is also where they can take advantage. Without enough energy, it is difficult for a strong team to perform well. Although Liho's overall strength is average, they can rely on their home court and physical advantages to fight a war of attrition with Fifan, trying to drag Fifan to the point where he can't stand it. Even if they can get 1 point from Fifan, it is extremely important. Liho certainly has good ideas, but Fifan will not let them stop their pace of progress. Fifan can neither lose nor draw now. At this time, no matter how tired they are, they will not relax. Moreover, their tiredness is relative. For example, after the last minute of the quarter-finals with Team Head, Fifan was indeed in danger. They encountered 2 strong teams, Canning and Changfen, in a very tired state. This made their situation dangerous. They lost the advantage of 4 points and came out of the situation. In the final analysis, it was because of the strength of Canning and Changfen that Fifan's lack of energy was magnified. And now, with the strength of Liho, it is really difficult to magnify Fifan's shortcomings. Fifan is also aware of this, so they will train when they should train and rest when they should rest. They did not make any special arrangements for this game. When the 35th round of the game started, their performance on the field was also not hot or cold. Liho made a lot of preparations for this game, but the facts proved that they were indeed a weak team. In last year's A-League, their ranking was not very good. They only ranked 6th in the A-League, and finally got a promotion quota through the playoffs. After the promotion, they hit some signings, but they were not particularly powerful. In a vulgar way, they were still using the A-League lineup to play in the Super League. It was also because their players were all veterans of the team, they cooperated well with each other, and they were willing to fight hard in the game, grabbing points one by one. Now they can rank 18th, and there is a certain hope of successfully relegation. In addition, some mid- and lower-level teams in the Super League did not perform well this year, so they were able to suppress Yinshuan and Yuchen. However, there is always a limit to hard work. No matter how hard they try, it is difficult to make up for the huge gap between them and Fifan. In this round of games, although Liho, who is at home, still works very hard and has some advantages on the map, they can only fight a stalemate with Fifan. This state may be beneficial to Liho. After all, they can get 1 point, but Fifan's calm game style has always made them feel anxious. This gave the Liho team an illusion that Fifan could kill them at any time. This possibility was too great. But they couldn't do anything else. Were they going to rush in? That would make it easier for Fifan to catch their flaws. Don't look at Fifan's calm appearance, that's because he didn't consume too much in this game. At the same time, his energy was indeed a little insufficient, so he didn't play that game so seriously, but it didn't mean that Fifan didn't want to win the game. They were just waiting for an opportunity. Zheng Qi, Bin Shikai and Shinrofei took turns on the court. These people were able to expand their advantages once they had the opportunity, which made the Liho team feel even more headache. Under such pressure, the players of Liho are constantly stabilizing their emotions, but they continue to be under tremendous pressure. After all, for them, the current balance was very fragile, and the initiative was not in their hands. The relegation team wanted to take their destiny into their own hands, and not expect too much from others. Liho understood this very well. So after waiting for the second half, they finally couldn't hold back. They began to counter-attack, trying to get ahead in the game, so that even if Fifan counter-attacked, they could still rely on the advantage of 1 goal to strive for a draw, right? This idea is very good, but Fifan did not give them such an opportunity. The attacking Liho was immediately hit hard by Fifan. After luring the enemy deep into the depths, Shinrofei's frontal interception made Liho unable to move, while Zheng Qi started to attack from the side and rear. When his operation level was fully exerted, Li Hao's formation immediately became chaotic. Bin Shikai cut-in made the chaotic Li Hao even more chaotic. Fifan took advantage of the situation and launched a counter-attack, and scored a goal to break the deadlock. The fragile line that maintained the balance was broken. After falling behind in the score, Li Hao could only play more actively. However, with the advantage of the map and the advantage of energy, coupled with strict defense, Li Hao managed to hold on to Fifan. Now that they're out, their advantage on the map no longer exists. However, they had to play. It was already the second half and they were behind. If they didn't play, they would lose the game. They couldn't play the next game. In this case, what Fifan needed to do was to constantly seize the flaws revealed by the opponent's attack. The overall strength of Li Hao was indeed not outstanding. After all, they were far from outstanding in the first-class league, let alone in the Super League. So in Fifan's view, they had too many flaws. As long as they seized one or two opportunities, it would be enough. 15 minutes later, Fifan expanded their lead, which also completely established their victory. Although in the following time, Li Hao, who had no way out, launched a fierce attack and finally recovered 1 point, they still failed to equalize the score and lost 1-2. It's enough to win one more or less, Zheng Qi said after the game. Although from the score, Fifan won this game very hard, but in fact, everyone who watched the game knew that Fifan had always been in control of the situation of the game. Although Li Hao finally got back 1 point, they had no spare energy to launch another attack. Fifan won the game in the most economical way. In another game, Qin had performed well. They defeated King Quang, who had performed well before, by 3 goals. Zheng also won. They defeated Yo Quang away. Although they still had no chance of winning the championship, Zheng also showed their level. There are still 3 rounds to go before the end of the league. Look, we have passed Aries in the zodiac, and the next one is Taurus. What does the comic say? Although we encountered obstacles, it is actually very easy to beat, Zheng Qi said in the locker room after the game. Fifan's players all laughed. If the next opponent knew what Zheng Qi said, they would probably be very angry and think that Zheng Qi looked down on them, but for Lingdong, they really don't have any special ideas now. By the 35th round of the game, the situation had basically become clear. Those strong teams that had performed poorly before have slowly caught up. Except for the top 4, Shenhua quietly rushed to 5th place, Xinfeng 6th, Jinlong 7th, and Nangyuo have now gradually returned to 8th place. Hongyuan King Quang, which had been ranked relatively high before, has begun to fall behind and is ranked 10th. Hongyuan slipped to 12th after the loss in the previous round. The team that replaced them in 11th place is Lingdong. Compared with similarly ranked teams such as King Quang and Hongyuan, Lingdong seems much more mediocre this year. King Quang has had many outstanding performances, and Hongyuan once rushed to the height of 6th place, while Lingdong is still the same as in previous years, with mediocre performance and mediocre rankings, always hovering between 8th and 12th, not very high, nor very low, and this team is indeed a bit mediocre. As a team of the backbone of the previous team, they do not have a god-level player, which is much worse than traditional mid-level teams such as Xinyu and Man King Quang Lating. However, they have been able to stay in the middle. Of course, they also have their own special features. That is, they play very steadily. If the opponent is better than them, they may not win, but they can often force a draw. If the opponent is weaker, they can often firmly hold the victory in their hands. Compared with their name Lingdong, they are very stable, which is their style. CSS Kushanda Western Novela on Canal Distinta Mundo Fanfic Novelas, Significat Lo Descarga and Y Superan Sinisfort Sot Invitamus Cordialmente Visitar Nostro Canal. Mundo Fanfic Novelas all encontras la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 879. The veteran team. Such a steady team is easy to deal with, but also difficult to deal with. If you are stronger than them, then defeating them will not be a big problem. If you are weaker than them, then even if you try hard, it will be difficult to gain an advantage over them. So this is a good result for Fifan. Their strength is indeed much better than Lingdong, and they don't need to work too hard. They just need to crush them steadily. Lingdong can occasionally draw the stronger team, often relying on the opponent's poor state. Fifan has enough rest time after the last round of the league, so of course his state will not be bad. Now Fifan is still 5 goals ahead of Team Head, so of course they have nothing to worry about. As long as they win the next game steadily, they will be the champion. Lingdong, Jianmang, Yushen, these are all teams ranked in the bottom 10, and Yushen has not yet escaped the danger of relegation. Jianmang is now ranked 16th, and theoretically it is also a relegation team. They are only 5 points ahead of the relegation zone, and there are still 3 rounds of the league, so they are still in danger. Facing such a team that has not yet escaped the relegation zone, there may be pressure, but the opponent will not have the strength to give Fifan a headache. So facing such an opponent, Fifan seemed very relaxed. Just playing well one game at a time was enough. In the next round of games, Fifan also showed their level. Lingdong was very motivated to play against Fifan, but their upper limit was there. Although they were a team with good strength, they lacked players with outstanding individual standards. At the same time, they were not particularly outstanding overall. They were able to score steadily in the league, but it was difficult for them to explode in this situation where they needed to explode. Fifan played more steadily than Lingdong in this game. They kept advancing in the midfield, then compressed the opponent's activity space and scored a goal steadily. When defending, they were often able to make the opponent's advance quite difficult through their own running and forcing. Although they were able to score a goal by compressing the activity space in the end, they seemed very exhausted after scoring a goal. Under such a back-and-forth tug-of-war, Lingdong certainly suffered a big loss. After the final game, they seemed to be able to play back and forth with Fifan, but Fifan finally won 2 goals, which could be said to be a loss without any temper. We don't need to worry about the goal difference now, because it's hard for Team He to catch up with our goal difference. Zheng Qi said cheerfully at the press conference after the game. Even if we draw in the next game, we will still be the champion. His optimism obviously made the reporters very uncomfortable. Team He beat you 5-0 in another game, and now they are only 2 goals behind you. A reporter said. What, really? Zheng Qi asked in surprise. It's true. More than a dozen reporters nodded at the same time. Oh, then we can only try our best to win the remaining 2 games. It's very stressful. Zheng Qi sighed. I don't think you look very stressed. A reporter couldn't help but say. This is to show our respect for the enemy, understand? Zheng Qi said seriously. The reporters were speechless again. Speechless, but the reporters also felt that it was really difficult for Jianmang and Yushen to stop Fifan. Jianmang won this round and was already 5 points ahead of the relegation zone. With 2 rounds left in the league, they had basically managed to stay in the league, because their current ranking was still good. Even if they lost 2 games in a row, it would be difficult to be relegated. Yushen was now 1 point ahead of the relegation zone. In the last round, they might still have some forced fighting spirit to show. In fact, we can't ignore the attention to Jianmang. Although they lost their core, the level of the others is still very good. Like Xiu, they can always stand in the middle, not only because they have a core of god-level players, but also because they have a group of powerful players, but they are all old-timers. Zheng Qi seemed to value Jianmang very much in private. Since they have successfully stayed in the league, won't the old-timers just play casually? Wang Yuanfen asked after thinking for a while. If they play against other teams, they may just play casually, but if they play against us, they will fight hard. Old-timers also want honor. Zheng Qi sighed. Then kill them. Jianmang is not very strong this year. Leader Rui said. The main reason is that after this game, we will play Chengping in 3 days. We can't afford to lose in the final, so we are actually at a disadvantage in this game. In this case, we need to be more cautious. Zheng Qi replied with a smile. That's right. The China Cup final is coming soon. We can't overdraw too much in the league. With this mentality, the game is not easy to play. Bin Shikai nodded immediately. As an experienced player, he certainly knew that with this mentality, the game was really difficult to play. The so-called worry about gains and losses is just like this. So we can't think too much, just play seriously, win 1 game, and then another game. The game has to be played 1 game at a time. We have passed 2 levels, and there are only 10 levels left. It's already in the countdown. Are you happy? Zheng Qi said. The extraordinary players responded to him with boos. Hey, you are too disrespectful. Zheng Qi said dissatisfiedly. The 3rd game. If there are 12 palaces, what is the 3rd palace? Gemini, right? Leader Rui asked Wang Yuanfen. Yes, it's Gemini. Wang Yuanfen nodded. I remember the level was empty. Can we just pass it casually? Leader Rui seemed to be thinking. You think too much. Wang Yuanfen said bluntly. Don't think that you can win casually. If you think so, we might lose our season. Although An Yuan Fen's words are usually unreliable, just like Li Gurui, his last sentence still made everyone nod secretly. Yes, that's the truth. The more it is under such circumstances, the more you can't treat the game casually, because any casual game may make a season's efforts go to waste. Qin He's opponent in this round is Minfen, which is at the bottom of the points. Minfen's current points are 32 points, which is still 3 points behind Liu Quang and Yin Shuang, and 4 points behind Yu Shen. These 4 teams are also that teams most likely to be relegated. However, even if Minfen wanted to grasp the last straw, it would be difficult to grasp it. With Qin He's level, they are unlikely to make mistakes at this time. So it is impossible to rely on other teams. What is most needed is their own performance. The Jianmang guys are very good at attacking. We just need to be careful. This game is our home court. We can make a fuss on the map and wear down their fighting spirit. Zhu Shang came out to stabilize the army's morale. Although his overall strategic level is average, he will not have any problems with Meng Fan, the military advisor, behind him. We use the Chanbangpo map at home. This is the most suitable map for defense and entanglement. We can keep entangled with them and make them always hindered in their offensive. Then their performance will be greatly affected and our victory will come more easily. Zhu Shang continued. Such entanglement is just that each of us plays harder, and it will not consume more energy for us. Fifen players not at one after another. Such tactics do not consume much energy. Although they need to improve their concentration, in fact, in the game, what is most needed is the overall coordination and scheduling, which is the most energy consuming. In the tactics arranged now, most people can be said to fight on their own and block separately. This style of play is simple and rough, but it can well play the advantages of Fifen's attributes. With their attributes, even if they're concentrated by the opponent, they can hold on for 1 second longer than ordinary players. On the field, the difference of this second can often have a huge impact on an attack. Defense entangles them, and the offensive is steady to suppress and look for opportunities. Victory will definitely belong to us. Zhu Shan finally said. Fifen's players knocked at one after another. They had never doubted this. With their current high position in the first place, compared with Jianmang who just managed to stay in the league, there is a world of difference. Just looking at the points, you can tell, Fifen has now got a full 98 points. If he wins another game, he will get over 100 points. Of course, Qin He has also got 96 points, and Changfeng's points have reached 91 points. The performance of these 3 strong teams this year is really amazing. And Jianmang's current points? 40 points, not even half of Fifen's. From the points, you can see the huge gap between the 2 sides. Fifen really doesn't have to worry. The previous worries were just that they didn't want to consume too much in this game, which would affect the China Cup final with Changfen. Now that the tactics have been set, they don't have to worry about anything. However, Jianmang has been able to get to this point, and they are certainly not an easy team to deal with. As Li Gurui said, after Yu Peng left, Jianmang is now left with a group of old hands. The old hands are of course very smart. To be honest, if your IQ is a little lower, you really can't be an old hand. Only those who are smart, experienced, and know how to exploit loopholes can become veterans. A team composed of such players may be lacking in other aspects, but they are not bad at all in terms of game experience and response. In other words, they are all players who can use various factors to the limit. And now, such a team is ready to perform better in this game. Chapter 880 Easter egg. The veterans would not do something that they thought was of no benefit. This match against Fifen seemed to be such a thing. However, in fact, the veterans knew that if they performed well in this match, it would be of great benefit to them. Apart from other things, Fifen's current fame and what they were going to do were already the focus of everyone's attention. If they could perform better in such a situation, their fame and status would also be greatly improved. Even if they wanted to transfer in the future, their treatment would be much better. The veterans were of course very clear about this difference. Moreover, with their vision and experience, they could naturally see that Fifen would not have any problems in terms of form and energy in this match. But could they really devote themselves to this match? In 3 days, Fifen would play against Chengfeng in the China Cup final. No one would give up in such a match. But in such a situation, could they give their all in the league? If Fifen's goal this year was not the treble, they might not have had any concerns about this game. After all, compared with the cup, the league is still more important. The league championship is a priority, which is something everyone will do. As for whether it will affect the cup final, that is another matter. After all, what can be fought for in the present should be fought for first. Everyone understands this principle. but Fifan is now aiming for the 5-time champion. In this case, can they still focus on the league first? The cup final will also be very important, and they cannot be unaffected. This is Jianmang's opportunity. For Jianmang, they are very clear about this, so in this game, they have reason and confidence to fight for victory in this game, or a draw. In fact, what they want is a victory. Because of Jianmang's characteristics, they are not good at defense, but good at offense, and good at competing with opponents for goals. Of course, it is rare for you to score one and I score one and then the game ends in a draw. It often appears very chaotic, either winning or losing, and there are few draws. This can also be seen from Jianmang's current results. After 36 rounds of the league, they won 13 games, lost 22 games, and only tied 1 game. In many games, the winning and losing were within a hair's breadth. So for Jianmang, they just want to play against Fifan. If the situation is similar, even if they lose the game in the end, they will still be considered a winner. Such a game is of course very cost-effective. For Jianmang's veterans, they certainly have incomparable efforts and enthusiasm to welcome the next game. When the 37th round of the league began, Fifan welcomed Jianmang at home. More than 10 million Fifan fans in the stands shouted crazily. As Fifan's performance this year has steadily increased, their fans are also increasing. In particular, the goal of impacting the 5-time champion has always been proposed by the top giants. Now Fifan has proposed this goal and is striding towards this goal. How can their fans not become more and more crazy? Of course, such a crazy attendance rate also makes Fifan's income start to increase. Their players can be expected to make a lot of money. In the next period of time, they will all become wealthy. However, Fifan's players have not thought so far yet. They just want to be the first team to win 5 championships. When they have such a halo, money will not be the first thing they consider. At the time, how much wealth they have will only be a number for them. Fifan's players appeared, and Jianmang's players also appeared. As old-timers, they will certainly not be scared by such a scene, they are at least experienced in many battles, and the atmosphere of the stadium will not move them. Instead, they feel even happier when they think that they can give their favorite team a good look in front of so many people. There were also millions of Jianmang fans who came to support their team, but their shouts were suppressed by the Fifan fans who had an absolute advantage. Moreover, Jianmang's performance this year was average, and the fans didn't have much enthusiasm to shout too fiercely. They came to watch the game just out of habit. Besides, Jianmang's performance this year was not very bad. At least it didn't get relegated, right? Although as a supporter of a traditional midstream team, they have become accustomed to the team's mediocre performance, but Jianmang's fans still hope that Jianmang can perform better. The game started soon, and the Changbangpo map that appeared in front of everyone make most people understand Fifan's meaning. Bring more trouble to Jianmang's offense in defense, so that Fifan can naturally gain an advantage. The fans basically saw it, and of course the players on the field would see it more clearly. It seems that they're still a little afraid of our defense. This is a good opportunity. After a brief exchange in the team channel, Jianmang immediately launched an attack. Changbangpo is a map with a very complex terrain. In the center of the map, there are villages, plains, and forests. Forests can be used for ambushes, plains are a good place for direct confrontation, and villages can bring some buff gains. These gains are random. Some are temporary attribute increases, some are blood recovery, and some are acceleration. When the buff of each village is refreshed, it will become a +5 place. More importantly, there will be a river in front of both sides. The river can naturally pass, but it will bring negative attributes such as slowing down speed and reduced reaction in the river, so this map is very helpful for the defending side. Whether it is interception and interference in the middle, or gathering in the defense line of the party, it is particularly beneficial to the defending party. Of course, Fifan will not be very conservative in the game. They still start intercepting more in the midfield. Several small woods and villages are good places for them to intercept. Jianmang launched a mid-road assault from the beginning. Instead of going to the village to eat buff, or exploring whether there is an ambush in the woods, the army gathered together and started to attack directly from the middle. As an experienced team, they quickly mastered the key to this map. A direct attack in the middle would lead to reaching the opponent's goal without much loss. If the opponent has too many troops ambushed in the woods, their defense in front of the goal would be weaker at this time, which is a very good opportunity to attack. Although it is also very dangerous to leave the other players behind, as long as the opponent's defense line is defeated first, there will be no problem. In the final analysis, this is an opportunity to take advantage of the time difference. Of course, if Fifin did not set up an ambush in the woods everywhere, but concentrated all his forces in front of the goal, their light assault would definitely be hit head-on by the opponent who was waiting for it. After all, when their army was moving slowly in the river, if the opponent's ambush appeared in the forest on the river bank, they would definitely suffer a rout. This is also a gamble. However, Jian Mang could afford the gamble. If they lost, they would just lose a goal. If they won, they would be able to take the lead by 1 goal. You have to know that with the China Cup attracting attention, if Fifin encountered obstacles in this game, it would often cause greater consequences. Jian Mang's players also knew a lot about the player's mentality, so they immediately used such a risky tactic. Their adventure was successful. Fifin did arrange a lot of troops in the forest along the way, wanting to gradually involve the opponent and wear down the opponent's spirit to increase the possibility of their own defense. As a result, Jian Mang directly launched an attack from the middle road without caring about anything. There were a full 6 Fifin players ambushing in the forest, but Jian Mang's large force rushed through directly. The skills they threw only caused a little damage, and Jian Mang's team had already broken through the midfield. Fifin's players began to gather and defend, but they were entangled by the 2 players left by Jian Mang. The 2 were also experienced veterans. They kept using long-range skills to interfere with their defense. They didn't want to take them away, just to disturb them. The others quickly came to the river and began to cross the river. Fifin, who was left with only 4 people to defend, couldn't withstand the opponent's fierce attack, and Jian Mang's attack was now desperate, naturally more fierce, breaking through Fifin's defense line in an instant, and then scored a goal. When Jian Mang scored, the Jian Mang fans who had been suppressed by Fifin's fans and had no voice immediately shouted wildly. They didn't have much hope before, but at this time, Jian Mang took the lead through a fierce attack, which was enough to surprise them. This is also the reason why Jian Mang makes them like him, although most of the time, Jian Mang's performance is very stable, winning when they can, and it is difficult to win when they can't, but they will occasionally burst out, and every time such a burst makes Jian Mang's fans very happy, just like looking for Easter eggs in a movie. The movies made by Jian Mang, the club, may not be of a very high standard, but every time the Easter eggs found in the movie are enough to make the fans happy for a while. This is also a feature that Jian Mang's fans like very much. Now in this game that countless people are paying attention to, such an Easter egg has appeared. How can it not make Jian Mang's fans feel more happy? However, for the fans of Fifin, such an Easter egg makes them feel a little disgusted and angry. So they just kept quiet for a while, and immediately cheered again, hoping that Fifin could quickly get the score back. Chapter 881. Continuous progress. Fifin's fans were very dissatisfied because they had never thought that this game would encounter any difficulties. However, the mood of Fifin's players at this moment would not be affected too much. They knew that this game would not be easy to play, and Jian Mang's veterans would not easily give up their pursuit of this game, but they did not expect that Jian Mang could give them a good look at the beginning. However, since the opponent has already scored a goal, the next step is to counter-attack and chase the ball back. Okay, we can start defending now. This kind of terrain is very suitable for defense. If we delay for a while, they will be more easily upset. Jian Mang's captain said in the team channel. He was very confident about this. This kind of map is indeed more suitable for defense. They gave Fifin a stun at the beginning, and now they can be a little bit wretched. They will not give Fifin the opportunity to drive straight into the middle. They don't mind constantly defending in front of their own goal to delay the opponent's attack. Anyway, for them, a draw is also brilliant enough. Regarding this, Fifin had not expected the opponent to be so wretched. After the restart, they launched an attack more cautiously, advancing all the way, paying attention to whether the opponent had an ambush. However, the opponent did not have an ambush. Before advancing to the small river in front of the opponent's goal, Fifin's players found that Jian Mang's group of players had all been guarding the other side. Although only 4 or 5 of the opponent's players could be seen on the other side, it was obvious that there must be an ambush of the opponent's players in the woods on the other side. Seeing that the opponent was determined to defend, Fifin could only sigh and prepare to start the attack. There was no other good way to deal with such a defense, except to constantly make tentative attacks, and then look for opportunities to tear open the opponent's defense line, or to attract the opponent's attention through a strong attack from the front, and then launch a surprise attack after crossing the river from the side. It was nothing more than trying to avoid the slow speed and slow reaction when crossing the river to tear open the opponent's defense line. Of course, there is a simpler method, which is to use the core players to attract the opponent's attention, or to use the players with better strength to forcibly withstand the opponent's concentrated fire, creating opportunities for other teammates to land on the beach. Every time such an opportunity arises, the game is often very tragic. The atmosphere of risking one's life to land on the beach often gives people a real battlefield atmosphere, even if there are only 20 people on both sides. Tiffin chose this simple method. Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan took the lead and rushed to the front, while Li Gurui and Zheng Hai responded on both sides of them, and Bin Shikai was behind them. The three core players rushed into the river at the same time, and such momentum surprised everyone. Although they were surprised, the Jianmang players would not hesitate at all. They immediately started skill bombardment. The four players guarding the river bank entered the river to entangle the opponent, and the others began to continuously bless and assist with long-range skills. If they could take away all the core players of the opponent in such a wave of confrontation, then it would not be a rare thing to push back and score another goal. This is also what Jianmang is happy to do. It doesn't matter if you lose the bet, but if you win, you will make a lot of money, so why not do it? A small number of players entangled the opponent in the river, while the others bombed comfortably on the shore. Obviously this is a very pleasant thing, and it is also quite easy to defend. However, there is a prerequisite, that is, to be able to entangle enough people in the river. When the four Jianmang players on the river bank went into the water, Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei and Bin Shikai flashed a burst of white light at the same time. Before that, Tiffin and other players then threw a wave of skills towards the shore. The light and shadow effects of this wave of skills temporarily interfered with the opponent's vision, making them ignore the white light coming out of Zheng Qi and others. Teleportation skills. The next moment, Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei and Bin Shikai appeared on the river bank at the same time, appearing in the middle of Jianmang's formation. This is a very dangerous position, but it hit Jianmang right on the 7 inches. Although Jianmang's players are all old-fashioned, they can't help but panic in the face of such a situation. Sending troops to the river bank through teleportation skills is a relatively conventional tactic for playing this kind of map. However, Tiffin's method of first charging into the river, luring the opponent to empty the defense on the shore, and then launching a sneak attack through teleportation is quite ingenious. It may not be useful under normal circumstances, but for the current situation on the field, it is extremely targeted. It's really wonderful. This couldn't be the coach's arrangement, it can only be the player's own improvisation. If they don't see Jianmang's defense line, they won't know what situation they are facing. Tiffin's targeted tactics must have been made immediately after seeing the opponent's defense line, otherwise Jianmang would not be fooled if he hesitated a little. When they reached the river, they launched an attack without stopping, allowing Jianmang to respond instinctively, and the following tactics were all aimed at Jianmang's instinctive reaction. What an amazing tactic! Yuan Fei almost shouted with joy. Perhaps many people thought that Jianmang was too stupid. He knew that the teleportation skill was the best way to cross the river, but he still didn't defend against it. However, Yuan Fei could see at a glance that this was an extremely targeted offensive tactic. Tiffin was able to make such targeted tactics on the battlefield. Now he is indeed getting better and better. This is also the reason why Yuan Fei is happy. As an old commentator, every time he sees a team with the hope of winning the 5-time championship, he is always looking forward to it. After all, everyone wants to witness history, but the previous 2 times, Nangyu and Chang Feng both fell at the last moment, which made Yuan Fei sigh. It's just that at the time, Nangyu and Chang Feng both showed their peak state at the beginning, and they were unstoppable all the way, but there was no change. Such a situation is easy to be figured out by others. After all, you are so strong, from the beginning to the end of the year. After a season, others can always figure out some good things. Under targeted tactics, plus some problems of their own, it is not so outrageous to fall at the last moment. Tiffin is different. They certainly won the Super Cup at the beginning, but at the time, they were far from reaching the peak. Along the way, their state has fluctuated, but they are constantly improving their shortcomings, step by step, making themselves more impeccable. This reminded Yuan Fei of the classical football era. At the time, the clubs that could obtain the supreme honor, except for a few teams that really swept everything and suppressed all opponents, the other teams that could obtain the highest honor in Europe, the Triple Crown, were often not outstanding in strength, but they played better and better, and finally reached the peak in that season, winning all the way and obtaining the top honor that they themselves might not have expected. Tiffin is a bit like this now, but their overall strength is better. with the strength that can almost sweep everything and the increasingly better state, such a team can truly deserve to win the unprecedented 5 crowns. Of course, Fifen still needs to play a lot of games before they can really impact the 5 crowns. After all, on this road, they can no longer tolerate any mistakes. Although they have already won 2 championships, the next 3 championships all appeared separately in a short period of time. At this time, a little mistake may make a season of hard work go to waste. So although Yuan Fei was happy, he didn't say much, just explained this attack. As he explained, Fifen had already defeated Jian Mang's defensor. The difficulty of this map was the beach landing, and after the beach landing was successful, the next thing seemed much simpler. Fifen quickly equalized the score through a strong attack. This situation made Jian Mang a little depressed, but the score was only a tie. Although they missed a good opportunity, they still had opportunities next. A tie means not falling behind, so they can still tangle with the opponent. So after the restart, Jian Mang did not attack as fiercely as before, but began to advance steadily, fighting for the village to get buff, and then launching an attack. Fifen did not give up the interception in the middle because of the lag just now. Their tactics still did not change specifically, but they kept intercepting in the village and the woods, creating defensive opportunities and interfering with the opponent's advance. The blocking Fifen players were defeated one by one and left the field under the opponent's superior forces, but there would be no problem with this. Both sides knew that such interception would not play any role, it was nothing more than delaying time. So after cleaning up, Jian Mang's players pressed all the way to Fifen's door, and immediately saw 4 or 5 Fifen players waiting on the shore. It's normal that the number of people is wrong. For a map like this, everyone will ambush a few people in the woods to defend. This is an advantageous part of defensa. If you can't see who is on the other side, it's easy to have tactical problems. Especially for a lineup like Fifen, whether it's Zheng Qi, Fei, or other substitute players hidden in the woods, the difference is huge. However, Jian Mang has been prepared for this. In short, they have to attack. Just treat it as Zheng Qi and Fei hiding in the woods. They began to launch a tentative attack. Landing on the beach has never been an easy task. Jian Mang's players will be very patient. Anyway, it's a draw now. Be patient and kill some time. It will be Fifen who is anxious, not them. Chapter 882. Great victory. The attitude shown by Fifen was indeed not in a hurry. They knew that under such a defensa, patience was the most important thing, although due to the terrain, the defensa side had to have an advantage, but in fact, the offensa would always take the initiative, because they would attack in various ways, and the defensa could only be passive. The two sides entangled and contacted for a long time, and Jian Mang finally found an opportunity to attack. They began to forcefully rush forward and successfully let 2 players land on the river bank and began to entangle with Fifen's players. Others kept coming forward to support and wanted to break through Fifen's defense line. Once they got ashore, their advantage would often be considerable. Fifen obviously did not ambush good players like Zheng Qi and Fei in the woods. The support skills in the woods had been gradually exposed to everyone in the previous confrontation, which was also a key factor for Jian Mang to choose to attack. However, in the constant confrontation, Jian Mang did not find a key. There were only 8 Fifen players who were always fighting with them on the front line. The reason they didn't notice it was because Fifen boldly rotated the goalkeeper by Senator, and the number of players confronting Jian Mang reached 9. Therefore, the slightest weakness and gap was ignored by Jian Mang's players in the confrontation. This made them pay enough. When the two sides were fighting, at the most critical moment, Fei and Zheng Qi, who had been hiding in a certain forest, quietly came from the back row to kill. The auxiliary corps who was dragged at the end to control the ball, didn't even have time to react, and was taken away by a set of combos by the 2 of them. Then they got the ball, and under the protection of Zheng Qi, Fei began to rush forward. Of course, the speed of advancing in this way is very fast, kicking the ball out with a big foot, then accelerating quickly, or letting teammates use teleportation skills, which can allow players to carry the ball across the entire court in just a few seconds. One person may seem a little troublesome, but a single knife opportunity for 2 people is a professional player who has received strict training. Soon, Zheng Qi and Fei arrived in front of the opponent's goal. Zheng Qi used several skills to force the opponent's goalkeeper away. Fei quickly kicked the ball and sent the ball into the opponent's goal. Overtake. After being scored by Jian Mang at the beginning, Fifen scored 2 goals in a row, overtaking the score. At the same time, Fifen's fans no longer had anything to worry about. They burst into even louder cheers, suppressing the cheers of Jian Mang fans. It's okay, don't worry. Their current outburst will affect the next game. They will definitely not do this for a long time. We continue to entangle with them and be patient. Jianmang's captain commanded in the team channel. As an old hand, their advantages were revealed at this moment. They did not panic because of falling behind, but became calmer. They began to attack again, and this time they were much more serious. They explored every forest before starting to move forward. It was because they were not careful enough when moving forward and did not explore all the woods. As a result, they were caught off guard by Zheng Qi and Shenrou who were hidden at the farthest end. When they carefully advanced to the Fifan defense line, they were faced with a Fifan defense line that was even more prepared. The two players were waiting directly in the river, and then there were heavy ambushes in the riverbank and the woods. This was the most reliable way to defend. The players in the river were used for sacrifice. Anyway, after they died, they could be replenished again in 10 seconds. For Fifan, they could rely on this defense line to defend until the end of time. Jianmang certainly didn't believe this, and they quickly launched a tentative attack. They knew a lot of offensive methods, especially on such a field. Such a field is certainly very suitable for defense, but it has also been studied by countless teams. After so many years of development, the means of attack can be said to be endless. Can Fifan defend it? You must know that this kind of map, which is not a secret but very special, is often trained by many teams in a targeted manner. These things can be said to be unable to be supported by talent, but rely on the foundation. The more proficient a team is in training, the more advantages it will have. Fifan is indeed very good now, but their foundation is average. The old hands of Jianmang really don't believe that they can be flawless in such a defense. Unfortunately, they didn't expect Fifan to be able to do this. The reason is very simple. The defense at this time was purely commanded by Liu Shibo. As a top player from a professional school, Liu Shibo's training can be said to be quite rigorous. Of course, he has learned such a landmark map defense strategy, and he has learned it very well. Because he has been a pure defensive player from the beginning, Chen Feng's vision and training level will not have any problems in this regard. So in this game, on such a map, Liu Shibo's defensive talent began to be fully reflected. As the saying goes, when the enemy comes, the general will stop the enemy, and when the enemy comes, the earth will cover the enemy. No matter how Jianmang attacks, Liu Shibo will use the corresponding method to defend. For him, the targeted tactics in defense are instinctive. He doesn't need to think about it and can make countermeasures immediately. Jianmang attacked for more than 10 minutes, but he didn't even touch the edge of the riverbank. Liu Shibo's defensive tactics had too many places to use. He didn't even worry about the unreasonable exchange of physical value. Even if the extraordinary players died more, as long as he could support for the next 10 seconds, his support would arrive on the field soon. Liu Shibo could even take into account the substitutions, which players to let on the field, which positions to initiate interceptions, which skills to use, where to go to fill in. His commands were constantly issued, and under such commands, Jianmang's attack was useless. So, in the case of a long-term attack, the first to get anxious and look a little collapsed, it turned out to be Jianmang. Their mentality is indeed very mature, but no matter how mature the team is, it is impossible to do better than them in such a situation. They kept attacking and looking for opportunities, but they couldn't open up the situation and couldn't find opportunities. Of course, few people can stand such a situation. So as they attacked, they slowly became impatient. Even if they were old-fashioned, when they got impatient, they were no different from ordinary teams. After a reckless advance, most of the players were annihilated. Fifan took advantage of the situation and launched a counter-attack. He used his skills to refresh the football and then regained possession of the ball. Seeing this scene, Yuan Fei knew that Jianmang was unlikely to pose any threat to Fifan in this game. Of course, Yuan Fei would not make such a judgment in advance. The commentator is a commentator. His main job is to explain, not to predict. Commenting on the situation on the field is what the commentator should do. He continued to explain the game, and the next game was similar to what he expected, but the game seemed more intense. Fifan launched a counter-attack, and then with Jianmang's strict defense, it still took him 10 minutes to attack the beach and score a goal. Their offensive method is very simple, that is, frontal force attack, relying on the level of several core players to open up the situation, and on such a map, their characteristics can also be fully utilized. After all, the attribute points of those substitutes can better show their advantages in such a situation. When throwing skills, they bring more lethality. When resisting the opponent's attack, their attributes also allow them to withstand one more wave of attack. Many times, opportunities can be created from this extra wave. And their general shortcomings in operation level are nothing when they're in the river. If Jianmang's operation level is 100, Fifan's substitute's operation level is only 80. However, in the river, the upper limit of the performance is 60 points. The gap between Fifan's substitutes in this regard is of course quickly eliminated. In the river, they really don't need too complicated operations. Standing still and outputting, throwing out their skills is often enough. Under such an impact, Fifan quickly scored again, and at the end of the first half, the score was expanded to 3-1. We can't relax in the second half, but we can defend better. After returning to the locker room, Zheng Qi laughed, patted Liu Shibo on the shoulder, and said, "The second half is up to you." Liu Shibo nodded. He didn't say much, but he was very happy to accept such a task. The reason is simple. He has never felt so thoroughly defended as in the first half. Everything he has learned can be fully utilized in the environment of taking advantage of the terrain, which can make the opponent's attack have no effect at all. You must know that Jianmang's level is not bad. He leads a group of substitutes, but he can make the opponent have no chance to attack. As a player who is good at defense, such a game is almost what he dreams of. So, Jianmang's old hands ushered in a nightmare. After the start of the second half, they planned to defend well, but Fifan quickly launched a fierce attack. After 10 minutes, the gate was lost. Now it is 1-4, they are 3 goals behind. Jianmang wants to launch a fierce attack, but soon encountered a more solid defenser. They attacked for a full 20 minutes, but they didn't even touch the edge of the riverbank. In the second half, they were very calm, but the situation of no offensive method work made them completely collapse. If they continued to fight, they would only lose face and would not have any honor. This made the fighting spirit of the Jianmang players begin to dissipate rapidly. In the following time, they played lifelessly, and Fifan didn't want to waste energy. After completing the rest of the drowsy game, Fifan ushered in another victory. 4-1, this is a big victory. Chapter 883 Preparation. Obviously, Qin did not want the suspense of the league to end one round in advance. In this round of games, they beat Minfeng away from home with difficulty. Although Minfeng made great efforts to avoid relegation, they still seemed a little weak compared to Qin. 4-2, this is the victory Qin got. Although Fifan expanded the advantage in goal difference, the total advantage of 3 goal difference is nothing. In the last round, it can actually be ignored. In the final analysis, Fifan also wants to win in the last round. Qin will definitely win at least 4 goals in the last round to exceed Fifan's number of goals. Otherwise, even if Fifan is tied, they will not win. Fifan also cannot pin their hopes on the opponent only winning 1 or 2 goals. If they want to win the championship safely, they have to win the last league game. Of course, before that, they still have to play a final of the China Cup in the middle. 3 games a week will determine the ownership of the next 2 championships. Fifan has played 1 game now, and there are 2 games left. We didn't overdraw in this game. On the contrary, this game will be the best warm-up. The extraordinary rises to be changed in the China Cup final. Now, if we want to reach our peak, we need to do what we did again. At the press conference after the game, Zheng Qi began to actively build momentum for the final. Zheng Qi should still remember how he stopped us from winning the 5 championships 2 years ago. Now it's our turn to stop them. Lu Xiaoxun answered naturally during the interview. Such an answer immediately set off the atmosphere before the final. Reporters from all walks of life began to make efforts to interview both parties. After all, if you think about it carefully, the 2 sides have quite a lot of connections. The main one is Shinrao Fei. Young Fifan and his gang grew up in a new district, and then joined Changfeng. When he joined Changfeng, Fifan had already formed a team in the Yamato League and started to attack. After 3 seasons, they had become a strong team in that top league, and Shinrao Fei also made a name for himself as a god-level player in Changfeng. After returning to Fifan, Young Fifan began to attack the 5-time champion together. This is Shinrao Fei's 4th top league season, and it is also his 3rd time to attack the 5-time champion. In the first year of joining Changfeng, because of the need to integrate into the team and running, Changfeng's performance that year was average, which made many people feel that Changfeng's sacrifice for Shinrao Fei was not worth it. However, in the second year, Shinrao Fei immediately showed a top level, and the Changfeng lineup that season was also the strongest. They were almost invincible all the way in the country, suppressing all opponents, but were tricked by Fifan in the China Cup final. The 3rd year followed, which was last year. Fei and Zheng Qi dominated the country together, but lost the chance to win the World Cup and the five-time champion because of one or two mistakes in the World Cup. After that, Fei left Zheng Qi, which made many Zheng Qi fans think that he was an ungrateful person. The extraordinary players knew that he was not an ungrateful person. Even Zheng Qi's captain Liu Xiaoxin knew that Fei's departure was not due to problems such as economy and dreams, but the most fundamental reason. Compared with Zheng Qi's personality, Fei was very different, but in the final analysis, there was one thing that they were the same. That was that in professional competitions, they could not tolerate a grain of sand in their eyes. So they gathered together to break such restrictions with the most powerful force. In the end, they had to withdraw from the alliance to show their resistance to the manipulative forces hidden behind. Although doing so might not make any sense, it might destroy the status and brand that the alliance had built for decades, and even affect the competitiveness of the Chinese team in the World Cup, but Zheng Qi and Fei would still do it because they thought it was right to do so. In terms of competitive fairness, there is no middle ground, no grey area, it is either black or white. They stubbornly thought so. Such an idea is of course very childish, but for competitors, if there is no such childish innocence, this sport will not be full of charm. They are determined. Now it is finally the end. At least in this year's domestic, there are only 2 games and 2 championships left. So even if the reporters want to interview Fei again, FIFA will not let them interview. Now is the critical moment before the game. The captains of both sides can just talk nonsense. Anyway, the game will be in 3 days, and there is no need to hype it. Such an important game will naturally become extremely heated. So after FIFA announced the closed training and media silence, the media had no choice. Zheng Qi also followed up and announced the closed training and media silence. The reporters did not dare to forcibly disturb them at this time. You have to know that FIFA now has tens of millions of fans, and Zheng Qi's number of fans is not much less. In terms of loyalty, Zheng Qi fans still have some advantages. Faced with such a large and loyal fan base, if reporters really want to block the players of both sides for their own interviews, then the fans of both sides will really dare to wear gas masks to surround the newspaper office, or find their game IDs and kill them every time they see them in the game. This kind of thing is not without precedent, so basically now the relationship between the media and the club is handled quite well. If there is an opportunity to interview, they will interview. If the other party really cannot interview, they will not pester them. The club will also reveal the secrets to familiar reporters from time to time. In short, everyone is in the circle to make a living, and they can't be too absolute, right? In this case, both FIFA and Zheng Qi got a relatively quiet environment to prepare for the final. Of course, in terms of preparation, FIFA has no advantage at all. Zheng Qi has missed the league championship 2 rounds in advance. In the 37th round, they played a game almost like training. Such a game will not only not create a burden for them, but it is the best warm-up. This means that they will definitely welcome this game in the final in the best condition. FIFA's situation will not be particularly good. After all, they also played a serious game in the 37th round, and more or less they still have some consumption. Moreover, FIFA wants to win the China Cup Championship to continue to move towards the 5-time champion, which also makes them more unable to lose in the game. More unable to lose, this is a good reason to win, but it is also a factor that will put more pressure on the players. Although FIFA's players have been prepared for this, the pressure will not disappear for nothing. They did not have enough time to prepare. Although they had already started to prepare for this game more or less, they could not really concentrate on preparing for this game under such circumstances. Preparation is of course a very important thing. Whether it is targeted tactics or preparations on certain maps, it takes a lot of time. 2 years ago, FIFA defeated Zheng Qi, who was in the prime of his career, in the China Cup finals. It was not because the opponent underestimated the enemy. You have to know that Zheng Qi was also challenging for the 5-time champion at the time. How could they underestimate the enemy just because they met a Class A team in that cup? You have to know that the cup is different from the league. Those who can rush to the cup finals, even if they're Class A teams, must have the relatively top strength in the Super League. This can almost be said to be something that is beyond doubt. After all, the cup competition relies more on strength. Often the top 16 of the 16 teams in the Super League. The Class A teams that can go further in the cup competition will enter the Super League in the subsequent games and perform well. Zheng Qi is impossible to take it lightly, not to mention that there was Fei among them at the time. Fei was very familiar with Zheng Qi and the others. Zheng Qi still lost the game, and from the beginning to the end, they lost without any temper. In addition to the fact that Fifan's strength was indeed not bad, they prepared for the game for nearly 2 months, which was the key. Such thorough preparation allowed them to take advantage of all factors in the game, including tactics, changes in the field, and even any details. This was the key to Fifan's winning the game. In a game, when the strength of both sides is similar, whoever is more prepared will have the advantage. Fifan's strength may have a little advantage now, but Zheng Qi is undoubtedly more advantageous in preparation. This will be a huge test. If they win this game, there will be no more teams in the country that can stop Fifan's progress. The only object they really need to conquer is the world. China's current level is the highest. If they conquer China, they will not be far from conquering the world. Although Nanguo and Zheng Qi both fell in the last World Cup, it was not because of their strength or performance, but because of other factors. Extraordinary players are waiting for the arrival of this game. They are looking forward to it very much. In the final of the China Cup, the opponent is a strong team like Zheng Qi, which is worthy at their pursuit of the status of the 5-time champion. In the Cup against Zheng Qi, in the League against Team Head, what is more suitable and a greatest opponent than these two strong teams that have dominated the past 6 seasons? No. So although they are working hard, they feel no regrets. If they can win the 5-time champion this year, then their glory will have unprecedented gold content. This is also a very important thing. Chapter 884. Before the game, we don't have much time to prepare, but we can make targeted preparations and tactics, got it? Regardless of offensive or defensive, Shin Fei, your task is to entangle Lu Xiaoshan. When he is on the court, you should be on the court and tangle with him to the end. Lieshbo, when the opponent attacks, you must be on the court to deal with Daixing. Although the time is not enough, Zhu Shan will still make tactical arrangements. 3 days is not enough for targeted tactical training, but it can barely have some effect. Under such circumstances, Fifan's targeted training went smoothly. The method of exchanging pieces can really play Fifan's advantages. At the same time, it is also very suitable to put the hope of victory on Zheng Qi and Bin Shiqiang. Their characteristics are that no matter how well the opponent prepares, they can't defend well. Such tactics are in line with Fifan's current situation. Such tactics should be easy for the opponent to think of. Mengfan was a little confused. Even if they think of it, it is difficult for them to have targeted tactics. After all, we don't even know how Bin Shiqiang and Zheng Qi will attack. They are also the biggest variables in the game and the easiest points to win. Zhu Shan replied, and then he smiled bigly. Yes, in this case, my role seems very small, but it doesn't matter, as long as we can win, I can be a decoration. It's good to have the determination to be a decoration, but before that, you must be prepared not to be a decoration. Mengfan laughed. Of course. Zhu Shan nodded. I won't forget my job. I don't know how much Fifan has prepared. Luo Qishuan is not easy to mess with. Mengfan changed the subject. We just need to do our best. Zhu Shan's mind was very calm and clear at the moment. In this case, what we have to do is to fully play our own characteristics. This is the kingly way. Zheng Qi is now better than us overall, but we have an absolute advantage and high-end strength. How to fully play their level is what we have to do. Mengfan nodded with satisfaction. In the past 2 years, it was not only the Fifan players who grew up, but Zhu Shan's growth was also fast. His mind began to become clearer, which allowed him to play his full ability without causing any obstacles to Fifan's progress. This is very important. Fifan is preparing, and Zheng Qi's preparation time is of course longer. For Lu Xiaoshan, this season may be the first time that Zheng Qi has not won any honors since he became the captain. He did not win any honors in the first year he joined the Zheng Qi first team, but he was not the captain of Zheng Qi at the time, but Lu Xiaoshan's fighting spirit will not dissipate easily. Defeating Fifan is his current goal. Such a goal seemed to be a very boring thing in the past, but now it seems very important. Stop Fifan from winning the 5 championships. In the past, others would stop them, but now it's their turn to stop others. It's really ridiculous to think about it. But that's how the game is, disputes. This year you have an advantage, everyone will deal with you, and next year he has an advantage, everyone will deal with him again. There is no hatred, it's just a fight. The competition for rankings and championships is always the only way to stimulate human desire to win. We have a big advantage in this game, and we should be sure to win. Wen Xiang said to Lu Xiaoshan with a smile. I am sure, but it's also difficult, these young people really remind me of the past. Lu Xiaoshan sighed. Some people say that if you often think about the past, it means that you are old. Are you also? Wen Xiang couldn't help laughing. What are you talking about? I'm not old. I'm less than 29 years old. I'm very young. It's just that Zheng Qi, Shinranofei, Liu Shibo and those guys are really enviable. They are so much younger than me. The world in the future will really belong to them. Lu Xiaoshan smiled. But since you are not old yet, of course you can fight with them. Wen Xiang said. Of course, Shinranofei will target me in this game. Let him see what it means to be the best in the league. It will take a few more years for him to take my position as the best attacker. Lu Xiaoshan said with high spirits. I feel relieved to see you like this. Wen Xiang said. What are you talking about? Have I ever made you worried before? Lu Xiaoshan said angrily. Not really, but your expression just now really makes me a little worried. I feel that you are getting old in your heart. Wen Xiang pointed to Lu Xiaoshan's chest and said. Don't worry, I'm not old yet. Lu Xiaoshan patted his chest and laughed. My heartbeat is still so strong. In this game, I will not only let Shinranofei see my level, but also let Zheng Qi and Liu Shibo see my level. What about Bin Xiaoqiang? Wen Xiang asked. No need to see, he knows my level. Lu Xiaoshan smiled slightly. For the fans of both teams, these 3 days were very long. Fifen's fans expected Fifen to win the final and win the 3rd championship of the season. Although Fifen has achieved extremely brilliant results this year, they have only won 2 championships, the Chinese Super Cup and the East Asian Cup. They are only 1 step away from the League Championship and the Cup Championship, but 1 step away is also a distance. If they can't take this step, they will never have these 2 championships. The next period of time will be the most important moment. Win 1 game, it will be 1 championship, win 2 games, it will be 2 championships, and win 5 more games, that is the final 5-time champion. When thinking of this, almost all Fifen fans will feel extremely excited, almost trembling with excitement. They have been looking forward to this 5-time champion for a long time. When the day of the China Cup final arrived, the venue became extremely warm again. The number of fans at the scene exceeded 30 million, even many fans who were not fans of Fifen and Chengfeng want to watch this game on site, not to mention the fans who watch the live broadcast. Their interest in this game is no less than anyone else. Faced with such a situation, the top leaders of both clubs were all smiling. After all, the ticket share income from this game alone is quite high. Of course, Chengfeng is an old team after all, and their funds have never been a problem. They will not be really happy for the income from this game. For Fifen, the income from this game makes them happy. But whether it is Fifen or Chengfeng, they prefer to win the championship of this game. The glory of the champion is more important than anything else. Before the game started, the players of both sides made a final mobilization in the locker room and then started to play. When the players of both sides appeared on the court, tens of millions of spectators in the stands cheered at the same time. Fifen's players frequently gestured to the stands, and Chengfeng's players did the same. Although they could not hear each other shout in the venue, they could see the excitement of the fans. Such interaction is also very important. It was not until they reached the center of the field and started to shake hands with each other that they stopped interacting with the fans and began to concentrate on the game. We have no hope in the league, but we will not give up the cup. Since I became the captain of Chengfeng, I have won at least 1 championship every year, and this year will be no exception. Lu Xiaoshan took the lead and shaking hands with Zheng Qi. The past is the past, Boss Lu. Zheng Qi was not affected by such words at all, but replied with a smile. There is always an exception to everything, and there is always a first time for everything, isn't it? There will be many firsts this year, such as the first 5-time champion, which will definitely appear. Very confident. Lu Xiaoshan sneered. Although he and Zheng Qi were relatively familiar with each other, he would not be soft-hearted when facing an opponent on the court. Why play a game without confidence? Zheng Qi said. That makes sense. Lu Xiaoshan nodded, and then walked towards the next opponent. The next opponent happened to be Shinranofei. Are you here to guard me today? Lu Xiaoshan looked at Shinranofei and asked. Yes. Shinranofei was not moved at all. Even though Lu Xiaoshan saw the extraordinary tactics, he was not moved at all. It can only be me. Very good, let me see how much you have learned from me in the past 3 years. Lu Xiaoshan's mouth twitched, even if it was a smile. I won't show mercy like I did during the team training. I thought Bai Ma and Qiang didn't know what it meant to show mercy. Shinranofei said. Of course I don't know, but during the team training, I'm not always very serious, that's a bit tiring. It's different in the game. Lu Xiaoshan really laughed this time. After chatting with Zheng Qi and Shinryo for a few sentences, Lu Xiaoshan walked to the next person, but he didn't chat with him much afterwards. After all, Lu Xiaoshan's image in front of people has always been cold and ruthless. Hey, this guy is really good at pretending. Zheng Qi couldn't help but complain softly. It's not pretending, he is really not good at speaking, so in public, the most he does is keep his mouth shut. Shinryo replied. Several extraordinary players nearby laughed, and Bin Shikai shook his head. He knew how powerful Lu Xiaoshan was. As a god-level player, he was targeted by Lu Xiaoshan more than once or twice. Although his mentality would not be affected, he also knew how outstanding Lu Xiaoshan's level was. But after thinking about it carefully, Bin Shikai felt that it didn't matter. Anyway, he had other tasks in this game and didn't have to face Lu Xiaoshan. Chapter 885. Getting better and better. The handshake ended quickly, and the players on both sides began to wait for the map to appear. The map of the cup competition was randomly refreshed, and no one knew what map would appear. However, for the top teams, they are basically familiar with complex maps. After all, every game is played on a complex map, and a slightly simpler map does not require too much energy to adapt. This is also a key to the super team's ability to crush the first-class team in that cup competition. FIFA is not at a disadvantage in this regard, because there is a tactical department composed of all Frankensteins. Their map copying level is the highest in the league. Daily training allows them to always be more comfortable on complex maps. Therefore, FIFA is more confident about the map, but Changfeng's players are very experienced, so it is not a disadvantage. In addition, they have done a better job in preparation, so in this regard, Changfeng still has a little advantage. It's Yulin, we have to fight as a whole. When the map appeared in front of everyone, Yuan Fei sighed. But this sentence is actually nonsense. The most complicated maps are all tests of the overall level of a team. The level of the core, the level of overall coordination, the reaction of the players themselves, and other factors will play a big role. Moreover, playing on such a field will be very complicated. Even the core players cannot stay on the field for too long. More rotations are needed. The overall level of the entire team will be greatly tested. In this way, this map is still somewhat disadvantageous to FIFA. However, in fact, FIFA is not worried. They have the most cores and are used to maintaining sufficient competitiveness on the field when these four cores take turns to play. The current Changfeng may not have such ability. After all, even if their substitutes are also very good, the game still revolves around a core. When attacking, others can sacrifice, but the core cannot sacrifice. When defending, others can die, but the core cannot die. When the core of one side is sent out first, the disadvantage of this side will be very large. Others can be sold, but the core must protect themselves. Unless they can completely open up the situation by sacrificing themselves, otherwise, how much the core can play on the field is always the biggest factor and key to the victory or defeat of the game. The map has appeared, and the players of both sides began to disperse on the field. Those who went to the bench went to the bench, and those who stayed on the field stayed on the field. At this time, both sides could not see who was on the field of the other side. They could only detect it after contact. After all, even the benches were separated by both sides. Speculating and setting traps on the lineup is also a good way to compete with each other. There are many tents on the map of Yiling that interfere with the line of sight. After the start of the second half, it is the same as Chibai. There will be fireworks from time to time that affect the performance of both sides. In short, these are some very troublesome things. At the same time as the map appeared, the first attacking party also appeared. It was not FIFA, but Changfeng. Such a map depends on observation. Remember to observe after the game starts, and then intercept and fight them head-on. Zhu Shan said in the team channel. He didn't need to remind them of this. After the game started, the extraordinary players immediately started to move forward. Li Rui, who was moving at full speed, was the first to reach the place close to the center circle. Then he found a tent and jumped up to observe the opponent's movements. As soon as he jumped up, Li Rui saw Feng Tu of the opponent. Feng Tu was also a good player of Changfeng. Although his status had declined recently, his strength was still very outstanding. I saw Li Rui. They were intercepting separately. Feng Tu said in the team channel. Very confident. Lu Xiaoshan said. We will break through the middle directly and give them a good show first. Wen Xiang commanded decisively. In this case, it would be a good thing to have a head-on contact first. Changfeng's style has always been to attack head-on, and in this game, the momentum must not be weakened. Of course, such a confrontation may be disadvantageous for the attacking party, but for Zheng Qi, maintaining its usual brave style is often the most important thing. Otherwise, if it loses its style, will Zheng Qi still be Zheng Qi? Maintaining one's own style is indeed the most important thing, which will even affect their actions in the transfer market. After Shen Ruofei left, Zheng Qi had two candidates to supplement their strength, one was Dixing and the other was Yu Peng. At the time, Jian Guangqian had already left. If Zheng Qi added Yu Peng, a player who could connect the front court defense, it would also be a very good choice. However, Zheng Qi still chose Dixing, who was better at direct defense, because his style was more in tune with Zheng Qi. This is very important. If you already have a stable style, then you need to carry forward this style, rather than abandon it and pursue other styles. This is itself a very wrong thing. Zheng Qi has not taken any detours in this regard. Even if Lu Xiaoshan was ready to gradually retreat to the second line before, he thought so because he hit Shen Ruofei, a successor with the same characteristics. Now in this game, they will not lose their own style. They are starting to gather in front, and they should be attacking head-on. Leader Rua shouted in the team channel. It's really Zheng Qi's style. Zheng Qi complained, and the Fifan players began to gather quickly, surrounding the three core players Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei, and Bin Shikai, and began to attack head-on. Brother Fei, Boss Bin, you guys take the guys, don't worry about me. However, after the team gathered, Zheng Qi immediately left the main force. This map with tents everywhere blocking the view is simply the best stage for Zheng Qi to perform. Shen Ruofei attacked head-on, Bin Shikai assisted him, and Zheng Qi hid on one side, ready to launch a surprise attack at any time. This is Fifan's defensive tactics. Zheng Qi launched a head-on attack, and they were not very worried, because they could completely do it with the head-on and Zheng Qi just one wave. Even if they lost, they could let Liu Shibo rotate to focus on defense next. Now they are on the defensive side and don't need to be so cautious. In this game, the final fight is still about scoring, not defense. Given the styles at both sides, it is impossible to play an ordinary defensive battle. The two sides soon came into contact on the court. With the speed of professional players, it only takes 2 or 3 seconds to get from the front of their own goal to the front of the opponent's goal. Of course, they cannot sprint like this in the game. If they fall into the opponent's encirclement, even Lu Xiaoshan will be quickly killed by the concentrated fire. When both sides are moving forward, of course they must maintain the stability of the formation. The mutual protection of the formation is very important in the head-on confrontation. In the high-speed movement, the speed of both sides is almost the same. Looking down from the stands, it is like two giant dragons, moving quickly at the same time and approaching the center line at the same time. This wave of movement alone makes many knowledgeable fans feel amazing in such a high-speed movement. Both sides have kept their formation intact, and the speed of movement has also been maintained at the highest speed. It can be seen from the eye that the place where the two sides contact is right at the center line. This means that the speed of movement of both sides while keeping the formation intact is actually comparable. This itself can be seen from the side of the overall strength of a team. Now it seems that the level of both sides is about the same, and they are both elite divisions. Elite divisions, of course, need forwards. In ancient battlefields, the role of the vanguard is very important. You can know from listening to storytelling that the so-called vanguard is to open the way when encountering mountains and build bridges when encountering water. If you encounter the enemy, you must try your best to eliminate it. If you can't eliminate it, you must stop the enemy and then wait for the large army to arrive to kill the enemy. Therefore, generally speaking, as a vanguard, you need to be a wise and brave general and an elite force. The so-called army must not lose its spirit first, so the vanguard must be the most capable. This game is no exception. As an extraordinary arrow figure, Shen Ruofei soon saw Lu Xiaoshan in his field of vision. The map of Yiling has tents everywhere to block the view, but in the center, there is a small open space. This open space can accommodate few people. If the movement speed is slow and this open space cannot be taken away, then the party suppressed in the half-field will find it difficult to deploy its troops, so it can only use the refueling tactic and be gradually suppressed by the opponent. Now, the place where the two sides are in contact is in the center of this open space. The first to contact are Lu Xiaoshan and Shen Ruofei. When Shen Ruofei saw Lu Xiaoshan also saw Shen Ruofei. Just by looking at the momentum and movements of Shen Ruofei sprinting over, Lu Xiaoshan could sense how much this young man, who he had once been very optimistic about, had grown to. In the last year of Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei was already very outstanding. Lu Xiaoshan certainly would not use all his strength in team training, but it was already a great thing that Shen Renofei could fight him on equal terms. Being rated as a well-deserved god-level player was enough to prove Shen Renofei's level. However, now that they met again, Lu Xiaoshan was shocked to find that this young player seemed to have become even more outstanding and powerful. Perhaps in terms of operation, Shen Renofei had not changed much, but his momentum and confidence in rushing over had improved more. What Lu Xiaoshan didn't know was that when Yuan Shao saw Shen Renofei rushing over, he had the same feeling. Lu Xiaoshan felt joy for no reason in his heart. Such an opponent was really too exciting. So he also rushed over. Both of them were in the lead, and soon, they would come into contact with each other. The next moment, the two of them collided with each other, and at the moment of contact, both sides exchanged 2 or 3 skills almost at the same time. Si est escuchando esta novela en un canal distinto al mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrar la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 886 Active Consumption. Lu Xiaoshan and Shen Renofei barely tied in this round of confrontation. Of course, in such a confrontation, it is impossible to determine the winner quickly. Even at the beginning of the contact, both sides quickly lost half of their physical value. With enough support behind them, it was difficult for them to die. Wen Xiang's recovery skill quickly fell on Lu Xiaoshan, and Su Jing's recovery skill also fell on Shen Renofei. However, people with discerning eyes can still see that Shen Renofei is still at a disadvantage in this round of confrontation. In terms of skill selection and operation, Shen Renofei is not bad at all. However, in terms of dodging the opponent's skills while attacking and reducing his physical value, he is a little worse than Lu Xiaoshan, which makes his physical value drop a little more. Although the excess is not much, the greater decrease in physical value will bring more pressure to the auxiliary players. This is certainly not a good thing. The skills of the auxiliary players are not infinitely cool and unlimited. There are only 30 skills, and some of them have to be reserved for life-saving or other purposes. Only about 20 can be used for recovery. Cooling, recovery effect and other factors must be carefully considered. Once a recovery is used too much, the next time may be affected. At the same time, compared with Wen Xiang, Su Jing is not inferior in calculating recovery skills, but Wen Xiang's ability to save lives in a melee is much better than Su Jing. In this way, Fifan will definitely be at a disadvantage in a head-on confrontation. However, in such a confrontation, Wen Xiang is not so optimistic. While using recovery skills, Wen Xiang has been observing the opponent's players. Soon she realized that there were only 9 people who had been working hard in the head-on confrontation. So where did the remaining person go? Although 10 people against 9 people allowed Cheng to quickly gain the upper hand and suppress Fifan, Fifan still had one person who never showed up, which was something that made Wen Xiang feel like a thorn in his throat. Who could that person be? Just think about it. Of course it won't be Liu Shibo. A defensive player like Liu Shibo can only play better if he participates in the defense on the front line. It is also unlikely to be an extraordinary main player like Smishu. They are not decisive if they hide. Thinking about it this way, the answer is naturally obvious. Who else can it be besides Zheng Qi? This guy is hiding aside, of course, preparing to make trouble. Whether it is the ball under his feet or the flaws revealed in the attack, he is probably waiting for the opportunity to appear. Wen Xiang was on guard while commanding the whole team to continue to attack fiercely and keep up with Lu Xiaoshan's rhythm. She believed in Lu Xiaoshan's battlefield intuition. Since he chose to attack fiercely, he must have his reasons. Although Lu Xiaoshan often falls for it, his offensive intuition is often the most accurate. Zheng Qi has not appeared, there may be a conspiracy. Wen Xiang just reminded Lu Xiaoshan, and reminded him when Lu Xiaoshan temporarily retreated to restore the cooldown. Lu Xiaoshan nodded, indicating that he knew. In the following attack, Cheng gradually gained the upper hand. They kept attacking and suppressing Fifan's defense line. In the frontal confrontation, although Shen Renofei attacked repeatedly, he was repeatedly suppressed by Lu Xiaoshan. The operation of both sides was similar, but Lu Xiaoshan relied on his more experience and still had the upper hand. At this time, Daixing suddenly exerted his strength. When Lu Xiaoshan and Shen Renofei were entangled, Daixing started to attack from the side. Daixing was known as the Meteor Sword. His ability to grasp opportunities and flaws was the first 6. This time, even Bin Shikai was caught in his trap. Bin Shikai was originally preparing to launch an attack, but Daixing forced an attack and seized the flaw that he was a little too aggressive in his forward insertion. Then, a wave of continuous skill operations made Bin Shikai miserable. Bin Shikai's operation was not his best side. He could still hold on against the god-level players behind, but facing Daixing, whose operation level was also among the best among the god-level players, Bin Shikai suffered a great loss and could only retreat continuously. He retreated, and Su Jin had to give him better recovery skills, while Lu Xiaoshan, with the blessing of Wen Xiang, began to attack more fiercely, and attacked Shen Renofei's defense all the way. The opponent had a blessing, but he didn't. No matter how strong Shen Renofei was, he had to retreat. Fifan's defensor began to gradually retreat and began to retreat to his own half. In this process, Fifan's substitutes kept staying to delay the opponent's offensive rhythm. It didn't matter if they died once or twice, as long as the core was still alive. After this delay, Fifan finally set up a defense line again not far from his goal. Zheng Qi also appeared at this time and began to participate in the defensa. "What's going on?" Cheng was still adjusting the formation, and Zheng Qi asked Zheng Qi. "Don't mention it. They pushed too tightly and didn't show any flaws. I followed for a long time. I had no choice but to come back and participate in the defensa first." Zheng Qi replied helplessly. "You're really useless." Niaohua said contemptuously. "That at least makes them worry all the time." Zheng Qi replied cheerfully. "It's okay, let go first." Cheng Feng's next attack began to be more fierce, and Fifan also invested a lot of effort in defensa. Bin Shikai was replaced, Liu Shibo began to command on the court, Shen Renofei confronted Lu Xiaoshan head-on, and continued to fight with sparks flying. Cheng Feng gradually suppressed Fifan's defense line. The two sides kept entangled, and finally Cheng Feng found an opportunity and scored the first goal. Beautiful suppression attack. Cheng Feng's attack was perfect. Such performance is not always possible. It is not unfair for Fifan to lose this ball, Yuan Fei commented on the previous attack. It was obvious that Cheng Feng showed an extremely good state. If Tinhe's performance was stable at 95 points, and Cheng Feng's performance fluctuated between 90 and 100, then Cheng Feng's performance just now is undoubtedly 100 points. It's okay, they can't keep playing like this, and the more they do this, the greater the consumption. Now it's our turn to attack. Zheng Qi waved his arms and said. Fifan's players knocked at one after another. Liu Shibo left the court and Bin Shikai came on. Fifan was ready to attack. The styles of both sides in this game were originally offensive. Cheng Feng was not to mention that Fifan was also a team that was better at attacking than defending. So losing the ball was not important. The most important thing was to get the ball back. Fifan quickly launched the attack. Shen Renofei continued to lead the way. Zheng Qi hit his figure again and let Bin Shikai assist Shen Renofei from behind. Fifan's offensive lineup was exactly the same as the defensive lineup just now, even in terms of tactics. This played a role in confusing the opponent. Cheng Feng did not rotate too much. Lu Xiaoshan, Daixing and others were still on the court, so when they saw Fifan's players attacking aggressively, they did not have time to think too much and could only choose to fight back. At this time, Zheng Qi did not care whether the opponent might reveal a flaw. Anyway, Fifan was attacking and had great initiative and control. He began to appear constantly, and each time he appeared, he launched a strong attack, disrupted Cheng Feng's defensa, and then disappeared again. The tents that could be seen everywhere allowed him to do this in a mysterious way, constantly interfering, constantly consuming the opponent's energy, and then through his own performance, he made Cheng Feng's defensa constantly make mistakes. Under such circumstances, Cheng Feng's defensa soon became a little chaotic and began to retreat continuously. Since it was ready to retreat to defend, Cheng Feng also made a wave of rotation during the retreat. Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing took the initiative to stay in place. The two began to join forces to attack Su Jin, who was heavily protected by Fifan, and wanted to refresh the ball controlled by Su Jin. This was just a gamble. Anyway, if it failed, there would be no consequences. Fifan also noticed this. Under the command of Zheng Qi, Fifan's players simultaneously concentrated their fire and killed the two top players of the opponent. However, with the help of this wave of buffer, Cheng Feng's other players had already set up a tight formation in front of the goal. By the time Zheng Qi and his team attacked, Cheng Feng had already replaced a group of players who were better at defense and started intercepting in front of the goal. The tactics of both sides are very mature and smooth, and they didn't reveal much flaws to the other side. This makes the game a war of attrition, which is almost unquestionable. The two sides will continue to seesaw back and forth, consuming each other's energy and their own energy. The final victory or defeat depends on which side can hold on better. Yuan Fei analyzed. Although Fifan and Cheng are both better at attacking, there is no doubt that in defense, they can't hold such an attack. Two teams that are good at attacking will also form a situation of mutual consumption when competing on the field. In the end, it depends on who can persist in such consumption to the end. A war of attrition will always be very tragic. The most tragic thing is that even if you know it will be a war of attrition, you will not take it lightly at the beginning. If you were at a disadvantage at the beginning, there will be no war of attrition, and you will only be chased and beaten to death by the opponent. When Yuan Fei said this, Fifan on the field also opened up the situation in defense. Zheng Qi's endless harassment and Shinrao Fei's tough frontal attack finally created an opportunity for Bin Shikai. Under his leadership, Fifan broke through Cheng Feng's defense and scored a goal, tying the score. We may continue to see this kind of situation in the future. Both sides have invested a lot of energy in offense and defense. Maybe it's because both sides know that conventional confrontations will also become a war of attrition. It's better to take the initiative to consume and finally compete with each other's performance in the endgame. Yuan Fei said finally. Chapter 887 leading the way for Fifan, they are not afraid of playing the endgame. With their personnel composition, even if the player's level seems to be a little worse, their attribute advantages can be better played in the endgame. The operation level requires full energy. In the endgame with reduced energy, no matter how good the operation level is, it is difficult to play out, and it will make Fifan's shortcomings flattened. But for Cheng Feng, they will not mind the endgame. The reason is very simple. They firmly believe that Lu Xiaoshen's level can be better played in the endgame. Both sides have their own confidence and their own fears, but they are all embarked on the road to fighting the endgame. Maybe it's because they know that other tactics will not work. Only in the endgame can they better determine the winner. But as Yuan Fei said, even if you want to fight the endgame, you can't relax at the beginning of the game. If it is not a tug-of-war at the beginning, you can't fight the endgame. The tug-of-war means that both sides can't have any room for holding back. Once you hold back, the opponent will take advantage of the situation, and it will be doomed. Only in the tug-of-war, when both sides have given their all and cannot suppress each other, can they enter the endgame confrontation. So from this perspective, actively seeking to play the endgame also shows the confidence of both sides. Confidence will not be defeated by the other side in the tug-of-war, and confidence will not be defeated by the other side in the endgame. In the end, only one person won, and it is unknown who will achieve good enough results and victory in the end with their confidence. Cheng Feng attacked fiercely, and Fifan defended tenaciously. Just now, because of the continuous appearances, Shinrao Fei was off the court to rest, which made Fifan unable to resist Cheng Feng's fierce attack. Lu Xiaoshen took the lead and attracted most of the attention. Then Daixing completed the kills on the side continuously, and Fifan's defense line collapsed. Cheng Feng drove straight in and scored a goal. Fifan quickly launched a counterattack. This time Shinrao Fei stayed off the court and did not appear. His task in this game was to deal with Lu Xiaoshen, so he had to participate in defense more often. This would sacrifice part of Fifan's offensive ability, but Fifan had been prepared for this. Zheng Qi's frontal attack ability is far inferior to Shinrao Fei's, but in other positions, Fifan's configuration is still very good. Zheng Qi keeps harassing, and Bin Shikai will seize the floors at any time, so although Shinrao Fei's absence has reduced Fifan's frontal attack ability by a level, Fifan's attack still achieved good results. Zheng Qi's frontal attack strength is much worse, but his attribute points are still over 800 points. Such an attacker, even if his operation is a little worse, the threat he brings should not be underestimated. With the help of Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai, Fifan's attack quickly suppressed Cheng Feng's defense, and then after a wave of concentrated fire and sprint, most of Cheng Feng's players were eliminated, and then they drove straight in and tied the score again. You should be there when defending, otherwise those guys will be too arrogant. Lu Xiaoshen said to Feng Tu. Feng Tu nodded. Cheng Feng's overall performance is not bad, but the good players are good at attacking, especially the two core players Lu Xiaoshen and Daixing. Although the defensive lineup is not bad, it still seems to lack some high-end strength. He Jing is a good assistant. Zhuno's Qin Jing and Miran have also grown very fast in the past 2 years, but they still need veterans like Feng Tu to stabilize the situation. Shinrao Fei did not play just now, and Lu Xiaoshen knew that this guy wanted to fight with him. However, for Lu Xiaoshen, he had no reason to give up such a confrontation. Shinrao Fei faced Lu Xiaoshen again, while Liu Shibo stared at Daixing. Although they were in a disadvantageous situation in defense, they were able to hold back the two core players of Chengfeng to the maximum extent. The more they hold back, the easier it will be for Fifen to attack. If they can't deal with Chengfeng's defense well and let Chengfeng score easily, then Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing can put some energy on defense, so that Fifen's offense will be greatly hindered. In a war of attrition, both offense and defense complement each other. It is either the east wind that overwhelms the west wind or the west wind that overwhelms the east wind. Once you are suppressed in one aspect, a sufficient chain reaction will be formed immediately. However, the players of Fifen and Chengfeng are very competitive. Under Lu Xiaoshan's fierce attack, Shen Ruofei was not willing to be outdone and resisted Lu Xiaoshan's attack desperately, while Liu Shibo was commanding others to defend while staring at Daixing. Liu Shibo was the first to stop Daixing's several raids. This approach allowed Fifen's defense line to support for a long time. It lasted for nearly 10 minutes before they gradually retreated under Chengfeng's fierce attack and were then broken by the opponent. It's our turn to play. Zheng Qi waved his arms and took the Fifen players out. Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing could only rest off the court in frustration. They could persist if they wanted to, but it didn't make much sense to persist now. It would be better to take a good rest off the court, otherwise, the second half of the game would be even more difficult to play. Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai, who had rested enough, led the Fifen players to launch a fierce attack like a tiger and wolf division. This made Chengfeng's defensive players a little depressed. They had always used fierce attacks to beat the opponent to the point where they could not take care of themselves. Even if they suffered a lot from Teen Head, it was just a few times that they were tricked by the insidious and cunning Teen Head people. When had the heroes of Chengfeng been suppressed by the opponent in a head-on confrontation? And what about this game? Fifen's gang suppressed them in the offense. To say suppression is actually not correct. After all, Chengfeng was also suppressing Fifen when attacking, but when it was Fifen's turn to attack, it was suppressing Chengfeng. For this situation, the fans of both sides and the neutral fans in the stands were very happy. At least both sides played very well in the offense. Whether it was specific tactics or operation level, they showed extremely outstanding abilities, worthy at the status of the China Cup final. There are endless wonderful shots. Now even the fans of both sides have put down their hearts to win and started to cheer for the wonderful scenes on the field. After all, they know that this game will be a protracted battle and that victory or defeat will come at the last moment. Now, it is better to put down the worry and watch the wonderful shots of this game. Advance, confrontation, suppression, attack, both sides showed a very high level in offense, and in defense, they also invested a lot of energy. Generally speaking, both sides played relatively steadily. For example, when attacking, the core players played more, and when defending, the substitutes played more, just to let the substitutes consume the opponent's strength as much as possible. Therefore, for that team of football era, it is not enough to build an excellent main lineup. The substitute lineup is also effective. If you only have an excellent main lineup, then when the main players go off the field to rest, the substitutes will be overwhelmed by the others. Then no matter how well your main players perform, it will not be of great significance. The main players must compete, and the substitutes must compete as well. Fifen had suffered a lot in this regard before. However, this year, after the core players became more numerous, they played separately, which greatly compensated for their shortcomings. Although the efforts of Shen Ruofei and Liu Shibo could not prevent Chengfeng from scoring, they could greatly consume the energy of Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing. Although these two god-level players were very good at playing and could persist for a long time, that was under normal circumstances. Under the entanglement of Shen Ruofei and Liu Shibo, their energy consumption was much greater than usual. Do you hurt people with your own power? Lu Xiaoshan couldn't help asking. It's just the most appropriate tactic. Shen Ruofei replied without any emotion. Lu Xiaoshan smiled and didn't say anything else. In his opinion, Shen Ruofei's performance was a more mature performance. He was more and more powerful on the court, but when the team needed him to sacrifice, he could also do this in obscurity. Such players are the most terrifying. Players who can give everything for victory can often achieve better results. However, Lu Xiaoshan is also such a player. Although he has always been brilliant on the court, it is because doing so is the most beneficial to the whole team. If one day he needs to be sacrificed to do hard labor, he will do it without hesitation. I have to do it even if I don't want to. Lu Xiaoshan muttered in his heart. He knew that Shen Ruofei might not want to do hard labor on the court. However, the current situation and hard labor can better help Fifen win, so Shen Ruofei will do it without hesitation. The mature Shen Ruofei, the more flexible Zheng Qi, and the still calm Liu Shibo. These three young people are really stressful together. Although some thoughts were turning in his mind, Liu Xiaoxin's performance was still not affected at all. After fighting with Shen Ruofei 3 times in a row, Liu Xiaoxin unexpectedly rushed forward again, forcing Shen Ruofei to retreat. Taking advantage of the gap left by Shen Ruofei's retreat, the Changfeng players behind Liu Xiaoxin rushed over violently, breaking through the surface with a point, and quickly tore open Fifen's defense line. "Go, kill them!" Liu Xiaoxin raised his arms and shouted, like a brilliant commander. His command at this moment also quickly gave Changfeng an advantage. Although he did not have the ability to arrange overall tactics, his strong battlefield sense could still play a huge role in the tactical commands during the specific confrontation. This guy is still so powerful. If we don't keep setting traps for him, it will be really difficult to deal with him. Li Qing's thought to himself while watching the game. Chapter 888. Relying on the organization. As Liu Xiaoxin's old rival, Li Qing's is of course very familiar with Liu Xiaoxin. He knows all of Liu Xiaoxin's game habits and also knows where Liu Xiaoxin's best points are. In addition to his invincible personal frontal breakthrough ability, in the first line confrontation, finding the opponent's flaws and then commanding teammates to tear open the opponent's defense line is also his best side. As the most outstanding tactical master in the league, Li Qing's has an extremely outstanding level in overall strategy and specific tactics. However, he knows that in specific tactics, Liu Xiaoxin is not worse than himself, but because he is on the front line, he is very weak in the grand strategy and has to rely on Wen Xiang to make up for this shortcoming. If Li Qing's is the commander who strategizes, then Liu Xiaoxin is the famous general who charges into battle. It is really hard to say who is more important between the two. In the past confrontations between Tin He and Changfeng, when Wen Xiang was not inferior to Li Qing's in strategy, Changfeng could easily win. And every time Tin He won, Li Qing's dug a big pit, letting Liu Xiaoxin and Wen Xiang fall into it at the same time, so that they could win. So it was not easy for Li Qing's. He fought two people alone for so many years before he won several key victories. But if it were not for him, other teams would have no ability to fight against Changfeng. Fifen is not confronting Changfeng head-on now. They just showed their advantages in the offensive. Zheng Qi's on-the-spot tactical ability is also fully utilized. He did not attack on the front line, but wandered around. This made his position very flexible. When he was not on the front line, he could command strategically, and when he rushed out to harass, he could command tactically. This made Fifen's threat in the offensive also appear quite large. They are fighting each other. The real victory or defeat will be decided in the second half. Is Liu Xiaoxin forced to fight Fifen? Or does he have other ideas? Li Qing's thought silently in his heart. Both sides obviously played their best in this game. In terms of the single game level, these two teams can undoubtedly represent the highest level in the country. Even Tin He is a little worse than them. However, in Li Qing's opinion, Changfeng will still suffer if they continue to play like this. Fifen has fully utilized their advantage of having 4 core players, but what about Changfeng? They are actually at a disadvantage in this regard. It is their overall performance that is truly outstanding. However, Li Qing's will not underestimate Liu Xiaoxin. He knows that this opponent seems to be honest, but in fact, he is also very cunning. Although in the eyes of the outside world, Liu Xiaoxin is a more straightforward one, and he is the cunning one. But how can a top player really be so straightforward? Even if he was honest, he would definitely be very clever in the game. Moreover, he had a patient Wen Xiang helping him, so it was even more impossible for him to reveal such a big flaw. At this moment, the first half of the game was over. The score in the first half was 3-3. Both sides had their own offensive opportunities in the offensive, and a draw was an acceptable outcome. However, Li Qing's frowned. Fifen has a slight advantage. Li Qing's thought to himself. In the first half, Changfeng kicked off first. In this case, they could have taken advantage of the kickoff opportunity to take the lead in the first half, but now it was a draw, which meant that Fifen had more control over the situation in such a confrontation, thus equalizing the opponent's advantage of kicking off first. Even if it was just a little bit of an advantage, in such a confrontation, they could have a considerable advantage. In fact, we didn't have any advantage in the first half. The situation in the second half will be more complicated, and the map will keep changing. The victory or defeat cannot be determined by this advantage, but we can give them a head start at the beginning. Zheng Qi said this after returning to the locker room, and Zhu Shan nodded immediately. It's like this, now is the time to consume. We are not afraid of consumption. Let's use up our attribute points. At least we can bear it better than them. This is our advantage. Fiffin's players knocked at one after another. The two sides played a tie in the first half of the game, but they did not fall behind in the confrontation. Compared with Zheng Qi, their substitute players may be worse, but the addition of Shen Fei and Liu Shibo will not make them suffer too much. In this case, they are not afraid. You don't feel tired? Zhu Shan asked Bin Shikai and others. Bin Shikai shook his head. Fortunately, we all take turns to rest, so the pressure is not too great. Zhu Shan nodded. Fiffin's advantage is actually reflected in the four of them. Players at this level can often play a big role. Not to mention four, even one is very important. A team with one god-level player and without a god-level player are two completely different concepts. If they can perform well, Fiffin will have no problem. Those four guys are rotating, but they are also overdrawn. In such a tangle, many Fiffin players can only stand still and output. They can appear very outstanding because of the drive of those four people. Although they will not be very tired as a whole, they will be more tired when they focus on those four people. This is our advantage. We don't need to drag them down, but as long as we can reduce their energy and make a mistake at the critical moment, then the victory will belong to us. Lu Xiaoshan said to all the players of Zheng Qi in the locker room. If we continue to consume, it will not be us who can't support it. The players of Zheng Qi also nodded. The war of attrition is also the most suitable tactic, they think. In other places, Zheng Qi is not sure to fight against Fiffin. The war of attrition is nothing more than leaving the final victory to luck. And what does luck depend on? The burst of the core players, whether the energy is sufficient. These are all factors related to luck. Although the opponent has 4 core players and Zheng Qi has only 2, Lu Xiaoshan firmly believes that the possibility of his burst is greater than anyone else. This is the confidence brought by the status of the first person in the league that has been forged for several years. Lu Xiaoshan is still the strongest player now. If Zheng Qi and his team want to surpass him, they have to come up with enough results. This game will also be an opportunity for them to prove themselves. The players on both sides are resting, and the fans in the stands are also resting. There are many wonderful shots in the first half, but compared with the second half that is about to begin, it is still only an appetizer. The real feast will be in the second half. The second half will determine the victory of this game and which team will become the champion of the China Cup this season. It will determine whether Fiffin still has the opportunity to win the 5-time championship. Such a second half, of course, attracts great attention. The halftime break passed quickly. The players on both sides came out, and the fans in the stands who had almost rested were refreshed at the same time. They were going to start the battle in the second half. The players fought on the field, and they fought in the stands. The biggest feature of the stands in the football era when celebrating and cheering is that not only the shouts, but the fans in the stands can also use their skills to create various lights, colors, sounds and shadows to add more momentum to their cheers. Of course, after entering the viewing area, the skills will not bring lethality, but the light and shadow are beautiful. After the game, there will be a big PK, which will start after leaving the venue, not in the stands. Various skills exploded in the air above the stands, bringing unparalleled effects. Of course, it also depends on whether the fans' skills are beautiful or not. The effects of individual skills are naturally the same, but if they are combined well, they are really beautiful. In this regard, the fans of Fiffin suffered a great loss. After all, Zheng Qi is an old team, and their fans have been running together for a long time, which allows them to skillfully play various skill combinations in the stands that are not very effective in confrontation, but the light and shadow effects are extremely wonderful. Although the fans of Fiffin are very enthusiastic, such a combination can only be made after long-term training and running in, so the skill combination they play lacks such excitement. So in the light and shadow competition in the stands, the fans of Fiffin lost, which made them feel very depressed. The fans of Zheng Qi looked at them proudly, thinking, compared to us, you are just a bunch of rabble, what is there to be proud of? Fiffin fans were very depressed, but they had nothing to say. Zheng Qi fans have always been very arrogant, but they also have the capital to be arrogant. Not only is the team they support always the best, but also because their cheering on the field always appears to be the most professional. They are excellent on the sidelines and on the field, which is of course worthy at their pride and worthy at their arrogance. Now, the team supported by Fiffin fans is no worse than the other team in terms of results, but as fans, they are still a little worse. For a while, I don't know how many Fiffin fans made demands on their guild bosses. They need to train and spend some time working on these aspects so that their cheering in the stands will not be inferior to anyone else. Such demands will of course be fed back to the top level of professional players and the top level of FIFA club from the bosses of various guilds after the game. Of course, that can only be regarded as a later story, but if you don't know shame, how can you be brave? The depression of the extraordinary fans at this moment made them never lose out in the celebration in the following days. In the past, they relied on numbers, but in the future, they will rely more on organization. Chapter 889. This is what Lucian thought. Of course, the players on both sides did not notice the changes in the stance. Their attention was on the game at the moment. The second half was about to begin, and in the second half, the map of the Battle of Yiling would continue to change. There were two changes. The first was that the tents would catch fire from time to time. Although it was not aimed at the players, after the tents caught fire, the passages between the tents would often be cut off. In this case, the terrain would become more complicated. Another change was that Wenshu soldiers would appear from time to time. Although they were fighting each other, if the players stepped into their hatred range, they would also attack indiscriminately. Therefore, in this case, it would bring certain variables to the game. For example, someone on one side deliberately led a group of soldiers from both sides to charge the other side's large army, although it was difficult to do this, because although these soldiers were very lethal, they attacked each other more often. It was easy for the players to be wiped out when there were few of them, and it would be chaotic for a while when there were many of them. Players who wanted to do this often died before they had time to lead the soldiers from both sides to the other side's large army. Of course, there are also players who are skilled and bold enough to do this. Every time they do this, they will create huge troubles for the opponent. To achieve this, it is not only a matter of operation, but also experience and flexibility. For FIFA, they have many players who can do this job. Zheng Qi, Li Rui, and Wang Yuanfeng are all good at this, and Cheng also has many people who can do this. Several main players are good at this. So under such circumstances, the second half of the game will definitely be more chaotic, and both sides will consume more. It seems that leaving the victory or defeat to luck has become an inevitable choice. Is Cheng trying to gamble on luck? But it's no wonder. It's really difficult to defeat them head-on with a team like FIFA. Gambling on luck is actually a good way, but Lucian is not a person who gambles on luck. Li Qing's thought to himself. The second half began. FIFA launched a fierce attack at the beginning. In the opening stage, the main players always appear, and this time is no exception. FIFA and Cheng both sent out all their main players. In this case, Cheng seemed to have suffered a lot. Lucian was entangled by Shinrao, and Daixing was targeted by Lianzhou. Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai launched wave after wave of attacks. Without Shinrao's direct confrontation, Zheng Qi began to take on the task of frontal impact, and he did quite well. At this time, many people remembered that in last year's league, Zheng Qi did everything, and he led the way in frontal impact many times, and his level of frontal impact was also extremely high. After Shinrao came with him this season, he rarely needed to do this, but in this game, he once again showed his versatility. Lucian, who was entangled by Shinrao, could only watch his own defense line being defeated by Zheng Qi. Both sides sent out almost all of their main forces and met in the center of the field. However, after a contact, FIFA immediately gained a comprehensive advantage. This scene made many people feel a little overwhelmed, and Li Qing's eyes fell on Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi's attack is too fierce. After Lucian was entangled, Cheng couldn't find anyone to resist Zheng Qi's attack. Since the beginning of this season, Zheng Qi has been hiding in the shadows like an assassin, always killing the opponent with one blow and he loses vigilance to complete his needs. However, today, he began to show his versatility. An assassin who leaves the shadows and attacks openly can also play a very important role. His versatility is beyond our imagination. Yuan Fei shouted out what Li Qing wanted to shout out. On the court, after Zheng Qi defeated Cheng's defense line, he turned around and began to counter-encircle Daixing, who was entangled by Lucian. Bin Shikai cut in him time and completely cut Cheng's formation into two. The two core players of Cheng were surrounded by FIFA's three god-level players. 2 against 3, with the level of Lucian and Daixing, they were not really worried. After all, their operation level was excellent, but it also depended on who they were facing. Even if they were facing the 3 god-level players at the bottom of the ranking, they might not be afraid, but facing the 3 young and strong guys of FIFA, no matter how strong they were, they could only sigh. Liushbo entangled Daixing and Lucian, and Zheng Qi and Shinrao's skills began to pour mercilessly on the 2 core players of Cheng. Facing such a style of play, no matter how strong Lu Xiaoshan was, there was nothing he could do. He could not surpass the system, so it only took less than 5 seconds, and Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing both turned into light and left the field. Fifan gained an absolute advantage. They began to keep moving forward, attacked all the way, and then scored a goal. Such a seemingly overwhelming goal made the fans of Zheng feel a little silent. You know, Zheng has lost a lot of games, and of course lost more balls, but they have never been completely defeated by the opponent in a head-on confrontation with all the main players on the field. Even in those crucial matches where Tin had defeated them, Zheng had never lost in a direct confrontation. They usually lost the game because they fell into the trap carefully dug by Li Qing's. So even though Zheng's fans knew that Tin He was their opponent and that Tin He was indeed very good, deep down in their hearts, they still looked down on Tin He, thinking that these guys only occasionally beat us by playing tricks, and how could they compare with our heroes? But now, for fun, in a direct confrontation, not to mention beating Zheng, at least one hard and scored a goal. What kind of concept is this? Although Fifan was attacking, the attacking side always had some advantages, but no team had ever been able to beat Zheng like this before. Fifan made full use of their advantage of having many core players. Zheng Qi's performance was a great key in this attack. It was his frontal attack that broke Zheng's frontal defense before Zheng could react. Bin Shikai follow-up was also very important. His timely cut-in cut off the connection between Lu Xiaoshan, Daixing and other Zheng players. It was normal for 3 god-level players to fight 2 god-level players. What's more, when Shiang couldn't help Lu Xiaoshan, Fifan's strength is indeed outstanding, but this attack will not be normal. If Zheng pays more attention to Zheng Qi's impact and withstands his impact well, such a problem will not occur. Yuan Fei's commentary made Zheng fans feel a little better. Fortunately, it's not that we are too bad, but Fifan also found a loophole. Our team will not give up so easily. The confidence of Zheng fans in Zheng players is indeed not without reason. Although it was very embarrassing to lose this ball, Zheng still launched a counter-attack without any emotion. Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing did not leave the court, but continued to stay on the court. The extraordinary Shen Ruofei and Liu Shibo also did not leave the court. Only Bin Shikai and Zheng Qi left the court to rest. Zheng launched a fierce attack. When Shen Ruofei started to intercept Lu Xiaoshan, he found himself entangled by 2 Zheng players. This made Shen Ruofei a little depressed. He could only continue to support it, and he was able to tie up 2 opponents, which was not bad. However, the next moment, he found that Lu Xiaoshan joined Daixing and began to attack Liu Shibo together. Liu Shibo suffered a great loss now. He was an excellent player, but he was a defensive player after all. It was no problem for him to entangle the opponent, but 2 top players attacked him fiercely, and he couldn't bear it no matter how hard he tried. Moreover, although Liu Shibo is a god-level player, his attributes are at the bottom among Fifan. A character who just passed 800 points is indeed at the bottom among Fifan, so he died in frustration not long after supporting for a while. After killing Liu Shibo, Lu Xiaoshan did not bother with Shen Ruofei, but rushed over in one go, completely defeated Fifan's defense line, and then suppressed them all the way in front of his own goal. In this case, it was a bit difficult for Fifan to resist the opponent's attack. Although they were still trying to interfere with the opponent and resisting desperately, they were still broken by the opponent after supporting for 2 minutes. The score was 4-4. Less than 6 minutes after the start of the second half, both sides scored a goal. The frequency of such goals was much higher than that in the first half. Being confident in your own attack, so betting that the opponent's attack will fail. This is really Lu Xiaoshan's style. Li Qing thought thoughtfully. On the court, Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing had already left the court, and Zheng once again made large-scale rotations. Advantage in experience. A thought flashed through Li Qing's mind. In terms of experience in the game, Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing are of course much better than the other side. Whether it is Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei or Liu Shibo, they are not as good as them. Although Bin Shikai is experienced, he is not actually the leader of the extraordinary attack, but just an important offensive means. In terms of familiarity with the map, Zheng has a huge advantage. In the complex environment of the second half, Lu Xiaoshan and others who are more familiar with the map will be less likely to make mistakes when attacking. This may be Lu Xiaoshan's idea and Zheng's tactical thinking. Thinking of this, Li Qing is almost certain that Zheng must think so, and Lu Xiaoshan also thinks so. This is in line with Lu Xiaoshan's characteristics, and he has enough confidence. Chapter 890. Judgment. Li Qing didn't know whether Lu Xiaoshan really thought so, but according to his inference, this was Zheng's most feasible tactic. He didn't make any mistakes, but bet that Fifen would make mistakes. Would Fifen make mistakes? Li Qing's was not sure. On the surface, Fifen was very likely to make mistakes. Their team was indeed too young, and except for a few players, their top league experience was less than 2 years. With an average age of less than 23, the possibility of making mistakes was simply too great, and it could even be said that it was unlikely. However, for Fifen, they actually made almost no mistakes this year. There were many small mistakes, but almost no big mistakes. In the game, small mistakes are inevitable for everyone, and avoiding big mistakes is the key. From this perspective, Fifen is not lacking in experience at all. It is mainly because of their core players. It goes without saying that Bin Xiaoqiang is experienced. Shen Ruofei and Liu Shibo both have at least 3 years of professional experience, and have always been in a relatively high-end competition situation. Their psychological endurance and experience are not comparable to those of ordinary young players. Zheng Qi has the least professional experience, but Li Qing dare not believe that he would fail. Under such circumstances, Fifen is unlikely to make mistakes. However, that is in a normal game. In such an important game, there are certainly more reasons to play seriously, but the pressure of the game itself, the pressure from the opponent Changfeng's players, and so on, are enough to make a team pay more than usual. Under such circumstances, mistakes are not impossible. Now it depends on whether Changfeng creates more pressure or Fifen's own ability to withstand pressure is greater. In addition, the venue of this game is quite complicated, which makes the probability of mistakes on both sides greater. In such a situation, especially in the offensive, the players of both sides not only have to fight against the opponent's defensive, but also need to deal with the map changes that may occur at any time, and the test will be more rigorous. Of course, on such a map, it is inevitable to make mistakes in the offensive. However, if you can keep it for a longer time without making mistakes, then the opponent will be under greater pressure. Whoever can't support it first will easily collapse. The good thing about Fifen is that they are the first to attack after all. If they can always seize the opportunity, even if the opponent does not make mistakes, then they have a greater chance of winning. Maybe Fifen is thinking like this: if we want to fight, then we fight. In short, we seize every opportunity to attack, and then victory will belong to us. Thinking of this, Li Qing nodded slightly. In his opinion, there is nothing wrong with Fifen's response. It's just that Changfeng and Fifen are both absolutely confident in their performance. With their current level in performance, it is a very normal thing to have such confidence. But in this way, Liu Xiaoshan and the others will also suffer. What if the other party doesn't make mistakes? Li Qing thought in his heart, but he also knew that Liu Xiaoshan might have made such a decision out of helplessness. After all, there is no hope of victory from other places. It is better to pin hope on the other party's mistakes, so that there will be at least a small hope of victory. Thinking of Liu Xiaoshan's mood at the moment, Li Qing was also a little helpless. No one understands this feeling better than him, because often, Qinhe is at a disadvantage against Changfeng, and can only constantly interfere with the opponent in the game, or bet on a certain link to change. Sometimes he wins the bet, then he can win, sometimes he loses the bet, and can only watch others win. But can he not gamble? If he gambles, there is still a chance to win. If he doesn't gamble, then there is no chance to win. Of course, he has to gamble. Li Qing certainly didn't have the idea of gloating Liu Xiaoshan. You have come to this day. He just felt that Fifen is indeed very strong now. Although Changfeng is now much weaker than before, the fact that Changfeng can only use this kind of game thinking is enough to prove Fifen's strength. In short, we have tried our best in China, and we are worthy of our hearts. Li Qing thought to himself. He knew that if Fifen won this game, then they would not lose points in the last round. If they won the cup, it meant that they could also win the league. Unless they lost the cup, then there would be problems in the last round due to the emotional blow. Originally in the league, Li Qing did not expect to surpass Fifen. What he had to do was to keep dragging Fifen and make them spend more energy and physical strength, so that they could consume more in the game. They are good at tenacity and have been dragging Fifen. Then Changfeng gave Fifen a blow in the final. If Changfeng can win the cup championship, then they will have a chance to win the league championship. I must cheer up. Li Qing thought to himself. In the past few years, he has never cheered for Changfeng. This is probably a cycle. On the court, Fifen launched an attack. In the first attack after the start of the second half, Fifen was not disturbed much by the field. Perhaps it was because they attacked too fast and fiercely. However, this time, they began to be disturbed by the changes in the map. When Fifen attacked the midfield, Changfeng's players still pushed out directly. Now that the two cores are not on the court, Fifan still pushed out. Under the command of Zheng, they fought hard against Fifan and carried out a step-by-step confrontation. This approach is obviously inappropriate, but in fact, this is the best way to defend. Although the passages between the tents appear very narrow, it seems more advantageous to defend on narrow roads, but in fact, the passages of the entire map are connected, and there are many passages that can pass through the defense line. If you don't start intercepting in the midfield, then the opponent can launch attacks from many roads, and the defending party must be comprehensive. The midfield is a must-go road, and the front of the goal of both sides is also a must-go road. If you're repelled in the must-go road such as the midfield, then you can only keep retreating, otherwise it is easy for the opponent to detour and cut off your back, or directly attack the front of the goal. You have to retreat to the next must-go road before you can reorganize the attack. If you are defeated in this process, you can only retreat again and defend in front of the goal. So despite the weak situation, Zheng Qi's players also intercepted in the midfield. This time they were prepared for Zheng Qi's possible frontal attack. Zheng Qi's frontal attack was blocked by them. Although this caused them to lose a lot of manpower, their position has stabilized. Fifan's attack certainly wouldn't have any problems because of such interference. They retreated to rest for a while, and then immediately launched another attack. What kind of performance can be achieved between rest and attack is also a key to whether the team is outstanding. However, soon, a change of venue brought more trouble to Fifan's attack. The sudden appearance of the chaotic soldiers forced Fifan to terminate his inevitable attack halfway, but the flame blockade that appeared at the same time gave Zheng Qi an opportunity. After commanding the other Fifans to retreat in the team channel, Zheng Qi threw a skill over, and then rushed into the hatred offensive of the chaotic soldiers on both sides, and then quickly accelerated and rushed to Zheng Qi's defense line. "Let's retreat, let him die," Zheng shouted decisively in the team channel. Even if Zheng Qi was good at fighting, he couldn't support it for long in such a situation. He retreated first. After he died, the chaotic soldiers on both sides would disappear. At the time, he would go up again, and maybe Fifan would lose the initiative in this attack. However, when they were about to retreat, they were shocked to find that their retreat had been cut off by the flames rising into the sky. Damn, he calculated it. Lu Xiaoshan, who was off the court, could not help but curse. There was a sign before the flames cut off the retreat. Zheng Qi must have seen that sign first, so he chose to do this. But even if he saw it, it seemed meaningless. The retreat was cut off, and the Zheng Qi players were just stunned for a moment. Zheng Qi had already rushed into their formation with a group of chaotic soldiers. The Zheng Qi players off the court shook their heads. In such a situation, even if they were on the court, they could not stand it. They would definitely face a group annihilation, and Fifan would not give them time to defend. However, they still made a final effort. Under the command of Zheng, 5 Zheng Qi players were forced to log off at the same time. This operation allowed them to quickly leave the battlefield, which only took them 10 seconds to return to the court to defend. The others persisted for nearly 10 seconds under the attack of the chaotic soldiers before they turned into light and left the court one by one. Fifan's players advanced quickly, but when they arrived in front of Zheng Qi's gate, Zheng Qi had already set up a defensive formation that was not enough in number but still complete. Zheng Qi is Zheng Qi, and the overall level is really excellent. Fifan's players had this thought in their minds at the same time, but they didn't waste any time and took the lead in launching a frontal attack. In the previous confrontation, Zheng Qi had died, and Fifan only had 9 players rushing up, but their movements were still not slow at all. Zheng Qi's frontal attack attracted a lot of attention from the opponent, and then Bin Shiqiang started to attack from the side. Relying on the advantage of numbers and Bin Shiqiang's command, Fifan quickly defeated this line of defense. Although Zheng Qi's players were still returning to the field one after another, Fifan's attack had easily pushed them aside. The next step was to score a goal, and Fifan took the lead again. Chapter 891. Tactical confrontation. In the goal just now, the key lies in Zheng Qi's surprise attack. Everyone knows that on a map like this, you can use the random soldiers to help you charge, but it is very difficult to do this. The random soldiers have high attack power. If you attract the opponent, the average player will die in less than 5 seconds, no matter how many people there are. Secondly, when the opponent sees you bringing people over, they are not made of wood, they will run away. In this process, the player who attracted the random soldiers may die early. And this time, Zheng Qi perfectly avoided these 2 defects. He launched the attack at a very good time. Just when the flames were about to cut off Zheng Qi's retreat, he launched the attack. In this way, he used his sacrifice to bring about the annihilation of the opponent, completing a miracle that could only be accomplished in theory. From the first half to now, Zheng Qi's performance in this game is really crucial. Yuan Fei praised Zheng Qi's performance. Of course, he could see that so far in this game, the players on both sides had actually performed very well, including Zheng Fei, who seemed to have no performance. You know, he entangled Lu Xiaoshan, which in itself was a remarkable thing. However, in this situation, with Lu Xiaoshan being restrained, Zheng Qi began to play at his top level, repeatedly breaking through Cheng Feng's defensor, which was remarkable. Although Lu Xiaoshan was entangled, or he did not play during the defensor, facing Cheng Feng's overall level, Zheng Qi was still able to score goals continuously. In the previous attack, he even used the changes in the map as the tactical support and foundation for his attack, which was even more remarkable. Complex maps always bring changes in terrain and bring interference to both sides, but he was able to use this in turn. I'm afraid that even Li Qing's would find it difficult to do this. Boss, can you do such an attack just now? Li Kailang couldn't help asking Li Qing's. I can see such an opportunity, but it's hard for me to lead it. Li Qing shook his head and replied. Li Kailang was stunned for a moment, and then nodded as if he suddenly realized something. It can be seen that Li Qing has a strong tactical vision, but his style is to command and dispatch in the middle, rather than charging in the front field. Even if he can see it, he may not be able to implement it. Zheng Qi's flexible position allowed him to seize such an opportunity in time. In this case, Cheng Feng is in danger in this game. Li Kailang said. If Zheng Qi can always use this in defensor, then Fifan's offensive will undoubtedly be easier. Then Cheng Feng wants to count on Fifan to make mistakes. Isn't it almost impossible to accomplish the task? No, such an attack should be done occasionally. It is impossible to work every time. This is also his tactical talent, a flash of light at that moment. Li Qing shook his head. If he can really do this, then no team will be their opponent. Li Kailang nodded. This is reasonable. Fifan, or Zheng Qi, is really so outstanding, then what team can stop Fifan? On-the-spot tactics that are easier to use than Li Qing's, plus Zheng Fei, whose frontal impact ability is only slightly worse than Lu Xiaoshan, and got-level players like Liu Shibo and Bin Kailang to assist, and a large group of teammates with more than 800 attribute points, such a configuration is not only luxurious, but also excessive. If there is such a level, then no matter how much resistance there is, it can only be done with human effort, and nothing else can be done. On the field, Cheng Feng's players began to attack. Being scored by Fifan did not cause any problems in their fighting spirit. Under the leadership of Lu Xiaoshan and Dixing, they quickly began to attack. The tough impact, coupled with the overall strong advancement, made Cheng Feng's attack appear extremely fierce. Fifan's defense remained unchanged. They had entangled Cheng Feng's attack well before, but at this time, their defenses seemed to be a little fragile. In just 2 minutes, Cheng Feng broke through Fifan's 2 lines of defense and directly suppressed Fifan's goal. Damn, it's impossible, why is Cheng Feng so powerful all of a sudden? When countless Fifan fans shouted in disbelief, Cheng Feng's fans also shouted crazily. Their shouts were huge. After being scored by Fifan in succession, they were a little worried about whether this attack would fail. However, Cheng Feng's current performance quickly eliminated such worries. Cheng Feng also played to their strengths. While Lu Xiaoshan and Dixing were being entangled by the opponent, they actually entangled Zheng Fei and Liu Shibo in turn. Under such circumstances, the other players of Cheng Feng showed an extremely outstanding level. They used tacit cooperation and continuous attacks to constantly break down Fifan's defensor. Without Liu Shibo's command and replacement, Fifan's flaws began to be exposed. They have a lot of good players, but most of them are attackers. The level of the defensive players is much worse in comparison. It was not a big deal when Liu Shibo was in charge. Now that Liu Shibo has been cut off, facing Cheng Feng's targeted attack, they can't stand it. After listening to Yuan Fei's explanation, the fans understood something. But now it seems that Cheng Feng's offensive is indeed very strong. They still maintain enough strength and advantage in the fierce attack, which can prevent Fifan from playing any advantage in attribute points. Being able to do this is enough to prove that Cheng Feng is in very good condition now. Of course, it is impossible to be in a bad state in such a game. If such a situation really occurs, it is either a problem of preparation or a poor performance due to nervousness. Obviously, the players of Fifan and Cheng Feng will not have such problems. After suppressing Fifan's defense line to their own goal, Cheng Feng did not relax. After a series of fierce attacks, they talked through Fifin's defense line and scored a goal, making the score 5-5. In the second half, both sides scored 2 goals each, and the game had only been less than 15 minutes. The pace of the second half has obviously begun to speed up. Zheng Qi's attack just now is even more sharp, and it took less than 3 minutes in total. After such a fast attack, Zheng Qi quickly completed the substitution. In the next defensa, they performed extremely well, constantly blocking from the midfield, constantly wearing away Fifin's offensive power, and even when approaching along the way, they were constantly resisting, delaying and wearing away Fifin's offensive spirit. Is this kind of defense useful? Didn't we still break through the goal? Zheng Qi's tenacious defense made Fifin's fans very dissatisfied, so after 6 minutes, when Fifin finally broke through the opponent's goal, they began to shout loudly, mocking Zheng Qi's behavior that seemed like a moth flying into a flame. However, Li Qing's nodded slightly, and became more and more positive about Zheng Qi's performance during this period. This rhythm will give Lu Xiaoshan and Dai Xing more time to rest, so that the advantages of Fifin's 4 core players can be better reduced. It seems that Lu Xiaoshan really has his considerations in mind. The last 15 minutes of the game is the time to fight with will and play. Li Qing said affirmatively. In order to make the team consume less in the game, in addition to the efforts of the main players, the substitutes also need to work hard. However, if the main players can break the opponent's defensive faster when attacking, it will undoubtedly allow the main players of the team to rest longer. In this way, the opponent will consume more, and when the final decisive battle comes, Fifin's main players will no longer have more advantages. Zheng Qi can put all their strength into the last moment. It's been more than 20 minutes. The next game is about to have a real decisive battle. When changing players, Zheng Qi and Shen Ruofei looked at each other, and both sides understood each other's meaning. In the next defensa, Fifin has to defend a little longer. This requires them to entangle Lu Xiaoshan and Dai Xing more tightly, and at the same time, others have to work harder. Although Liu Shibo didn't have time to command, Fifin's defensa should also be able to perform better. That depends on Zhu Shan's command. At such a time, Zhu Shan was not polite. He was good at on-the-spot command, but now, most of the time, he gave the command to Zheng Qi and Liu Shibo who could command better. And now, Liu Shibo was entangled by the opponent's Dai Xing in turn, and it was time for him to play a role. Zheng Qi began a fierce attack. They still wanted to make a quick decision as before, so that Fifin and Zheng Qi would have more time to play, so as to gain more advantages at the last moment. However, the tenacity shown by Fifin this time was much better than before. Shen Ruofei and Liu Shibo were still being entangled by Lu Xiaoshan and Dai Xing, but they withstood the opponent's attack at the front. The extraordinary players began to set up a defensive formation in an orderly manner. Some of them fought in the front, while others stood in the back to output. After a while, they gradually changed positions under the command of Zhu Shan, letting the players who had been fighting head-on retreat and replaced them with the players who had just been standing and outputting, so as to fully play the advantage of attribute points. Under the command of Zhu Shan, the extraordinary players held out for a long time before gradually retreating under the fierce attack of the opponent, all the way to the front of the goal, but at the time, 5 or 6 minutes had passed. The targeted tactics of both sides are really eye-opening. After being targeted once, they quickly came up with a way to deal with it the second time. Without a sufficiently outstanding overall level and tactical command ability, it is absolutely impossible to do this. This final has finally come to the last moment. Let us look forward to the arrival of more exciting moments. Chapter 892 Conspiracy. Yuan Fei's words can be regarded as a footnote to the previous game. Although the previous 75 minutes of the game were all for the preparation of the last 15 minutes, those preparations were not just for casually throwing a bundle of straw, but required careful arrangement to be qualified to prepare for the end. Both sides lacked their brains and tactics and gave everything in the confrontation. What they fought for was just the qualification to finally step onto this stage. Just like a season, so many victories and so many efforts to move forward were all for the final stage. If the preparations were not made hard enough before, then there would be no qualification to step onto the final stage. This world is so cruel. If the opponent did not prepare well enough in the previous preparations, then he would lose the qualification to step onto the stage in advance. Of course, neither side has lost such qualifications now. In the previous confrontation, they have paid enough, such as energy and fighting spirit. Now, both sides are already scarred and exhausted. Of course, it is not so exaggerated, but it is true that they are already very tired. In such a situation, they still have to fight to the last moment. The score is now 6-6. As expected by everyone, the two sides played a big score in the final. This is certainly not unexpected by everyone. After all, Fifan is good at attacking, and Zheng Qi is also good at attacking. How can these two teams not play a big score when they meet? If Zheng Qi plays team head and Fifan plays team head, there may be some small scores such as 1-0 and 2-1, but when these two teams are together, it must be a big score, no need to think about it. Both sides seized all their offensive opportunities, and a draw is the best reward for them. Unfortunately, there can only be one champion in the end. Even if it is a draw, there will be a final winner who will stand to the end. The final moment has arrived. When this moment came, Fifan took the lead in attacking. Everyone attack, kill them. Zheng Qi shouted in the team channel. Now is the time to fight desperately, so of course we have to use all our strength. In addition to goalkeeper by Senator, Fifan played Zheng Qi, Shinrao Fei, Liu Shibo, Bin Shikai, Zheng Xu, Zheng Hai, Niao Su Jin, Li Rui, and Wang Yuanfen. This was their best lineup, but they left Lin Fei, Zheng Qi and others to rotate in. After all, in such a confrontation, it was inevitable that someone would die. As long as the core was not dead, the others could keep coming up and there would be no problem. And Zheng Qi also took out all their main forces. The formations of both sides began to move forward quickly, just like when the game just started. Maintaining the overall movement at high speed has always been a behavior that can observe the level of both sides from the beginning. When the game just started, the two sides came together like this, and it was a draw at the time. The place where the two sides came into contact was in the middle of the midfield. That means that the speed of movement of both sides is almost the same. This kind of overall movement cannot be seen by individuals alone, but also depends on the tacit understanding of the whole. Zheng Qi's tacit understanding is of course no problem. At the time, Fifan was able to tie with them, which was also very surprising. And now, the two sides met in the midfield. Lu Xiaoshan frowned. There was a burst of exclamations from the stands. From the top of the stands, it is of course easier to see and clearer. The line of contact between the two sides is more inclined to Zheng Qi's half. This means that in terms of overall movement, Fifan is a little faster than Zheng Qi. In such contact in the first half, Zheng Qi was not at a disadvantage at all, but now, Fifan has already gained some advantages. Lu Xiaoshan was in the game, but he also noticed this difference very keenly. However, with Lu Xiaoshan's level, he quickly realized why there was such a difference. Before, when Fifan moved as a whole, he had to take care of Su Jin, so the speed of movement was often slower, but now, they gave up protecting Su Jin and moved as a whole, leaving Su Jin behind, so that they had the advantage in movement. This is of course a very risky thing. Everyone knows what kind of dilemma the team will encounter if the auxiliary core is not adequately protected. However, in the current situation, the auxiliary core is temporarily left behind, which is not a big deal. Moreover, they only started to accelerate when they moved all the way to the middle circle, otherwise they would not be only one line ahead of Zheng Qi's speed. But even if it was dangerous, they had to move faster. Lu Xiaoshan immediately realized that the other party must have some other conspiracy or practice. After all, taking such a risk, there must be the same or more benefits. The next moment, the formations of both sides suddenly collided, just like two powerful armies began to attack head-on. Shinrao Fei was still the first to entangle him, and Lu Xiaoshan could only meet him. Although Shinrao Fei was still a little worse than him, Lu Xiaoshan could not relax at all when facing him, otherwise, he would be defeated by the other party too easily. The so-called Masters fight, the victory or defeat is often in an instant, especially if you don't concentrate for a while, it is possible for someone to find a flaw. Any confrontation is like this. When the two sides are at a similar level, the decision of victory or defeat will be determined by whether the energy is concentrated. Lu Xiaoshan certainly knows this, so although he doesn't know what kind of conspiracy Fifan will use, he can only concentrate on confronting Shinrao Fei. Before dealing with such a guy, there is no way to deal with anything else. Before, he asked his teammates to temporarily entangle Shinrao Fei, and then he defeated Liu Shibo himself, but such a trick only needs to be used once, and then used again. Shinrao Fei is not a fool, and he will not be fooled again and again. Therefore, when masters fight each other, especially top players, they often feel very boring after a long time, because some fantastic ideas can only play a small role, and they can only fight with their true level and basic skills. Shinrao Fei is actually very familiar with Lu Xiaoshan. In addition, he has fought with Lu Xiaoshan several times after leaving Fifan. After gradually adapting to the advantages brought by Lu Xiaoshan's experience, he can also entangle Lu Xiaoshan more steadily. Lu Xiaoxun's level is of course beyond doubt, but in his opinion, in this game, when the game just started and now, Shin Fei's level has improved to a certain extent. He is indeed a talented player. In the previous game, although he has shown a top level, his talent has not yet been brought into play. Under his own threat and pressure, he began to force out all his remaining potential. If Shin Fei's level was still a step behind him before, then now, Shin Fei's level is already infinitely close to Lu Xiaoxun. Oops, there is such a variable in this game, it's a bit troublesome. Lu Xiaoxun thought to himself. In the top confrontation, any factor may affect the final result, not to mention the most direct factor of on-the-spot improvement. Lu Xiaoxun actually didn't see the improvement of Shin Fei and Zheng Qi's level clearly, which made Lu Xiaoxun a little worried. However, despite his worries, his hands were still not slow at all. As a top player, he knew that in such a situation, he could not waver in any way. He still confronted Shin Fei toughly, but in the overall confrontation, he began to gradually move towards a place that was unfavorable to Cheng. The two cores were entangled, and when facing extraordinary players, the others not only had to face the attribute advantages of the opponent, but also the advantages of the opponent's core players. The elusive Zheng Qi caused them too much trouble, and the other Fifan players led by Pinship Kailang could also cause great trouble. You should know that the Fifan players who are now on the field are their main players. Even if their operation is a little worse than that of Cheng's main players, there is definitely no big difference. In addition to their advantage in attribute points, Cheng seems very strenuous when fighting against opponents. It is already very strenuous, and Zheng Qi occasionally pops up to attack, which makes their defense line begin to collapse continuously. Seeing that their team can no longer support, Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing began to retreat. They can't hang here. Under the leadership of Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing, Cheng began to retreat gradually, but at this time, Fifan launched another surprise attack. Cheng had just started to retreat, and Su Jin used 2 teleportation skills in succession. She joined the battlefield a little later, which made her skills cool down, but she was in a very good state. 5 Fifan players were teleported at the same time, just cutting off Cheng's retreat. The double teaming from both sides also trapped Cheng's players in a small passage, which caused Cheng's players to suffer a big loss again. In the game, players are actually very fragile. After all, 1 point of physical attribute is equivalent to 10 points of physical fitness. With an average player's 700 points of attribute points, the value of physical fitness will not exceed 100 points. In other words, generally speaking, among professional players, the attribute points used for physical fitness during the game will not be too few or too many. Those with more attribute points may exceed 100 points, and those with fewer attribute points will also have 90 points. However, even so, a player's physical fitness on the court is only about 900 to 1000 points, and any skill, if used accurately, can take away 200, 300, or 400 points of physical fitness. Of course, there is a very complicated way to calculate the physical fitness value taken away. Professional players can naturally calculate it, but it is difficult for ordinary players to calculate it. In this situation, players need to dodge to stay alive, or use their non-vital parts to withstand the opponent's skills. Of course, the recovery skills of the core players are also needed to maintain a longer endurance on the field. The reason why the core players appear more often is because they have stronger ability to stay alive, and the support players take better care of them. CS escuchando esta novela en canal distinto mundo fanfic novelas, significat lo descarga and y subir en cines fuerzos invitamos cordialmente a visitar nuestro canal. Mundo fanfic novelas all encontrás la versión original de esta historia y podrás explorar muchas otras novelas de diversos narradores. Te esperamos para sumergirte en un mundo de novelas increíbles. Chapter 893. Cheng's backhand. But no matter how much the assistants take care of you, in the final analysis, to save your life, you have to rely on yourself more. Dodging is one of the most important means of saving your life, so the space for movement is so important. After one side is suppressed in front of its own door, it lacks space for movement, and it is only a matter of time before the door is broken. And now, the players of Cheng are in such an embarrassing situation. They are surrounded by extraordinary players in a narrow passage. It is very difficult to move, let alone dodge. Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing did not give up. They turned back and rushed back, trying to attack the opponents in front and break out a way out. After all, there are only 5 opponents in front now, including Su Jin, who has little combat power. In this case, there is still a chance to attack head-on. However, at the exits of the two passages, Shen Fei and Liu Shibo blocked the entrances. Su Jin behind them kept restoring them, while others kept hitting them with a large range of skills, leaving Changfeng's players with nowhere to hide. As a result, Changfeng's players could only feel depressed and frustrated, hanging on these two narrow roads one after another. With the frontal attack and the timely encirclement, Fifen showed an extremely strong level in this wave of attack. Such performance made everyone speechless. Although Fifen had scored goals through such fierce attacks before, at the time, Changfeng's two core players were not on the court. It was normal to suffer such a big loss because of the fierce attack by Fifen and the fact that they did not notice Zheng Qi's frontal attack ability. And now, Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing, the two core players, were on the court, and they were all the main players, but they were still defeated by Fifen head-on, and a very embarrassing team was wiped out. After the opponent was wiped out, it was much easier to attack again. Zheng Qi and Bin Shikai received a long pass from the backcourt one after another, and then rushed to the front of Changfeng in a short time. Before the Changfeng players were able to pass the cooling period and go on the court, they forced the goalkeeper of Changfeng away and scored a goal. 7-6, Fifen scored the first goal at the last moment. Strong offensive ability. Fifen started to explode at this time. The previous struggle was for this moment of explosion. They have a very good level in the main lineup, and the substitute lineup is much worse. Now, in the remaining 15 minutes, they can completely use the main lineup to play all the remaining games, so that their shortcomings no longer exist. If Changfeng did not consider this, it would be their mistake. Yuan Fei said after thinking about it. What he didn't know was that Changfeng was also depressed at this time. It's not that they didn't consider that Fifen would use all the main players to play the rest of the game at the last moment. They actually prepared for it. Before, their main players were also taking turns to rest, ready to fight Fifen to the end of this time. However, in the contact just now, Fifen showed that they were in a better state than usual, and a complete tactical thinking in terms of tactics and strength, Fifen has an advantage. In this case, how to play that game. The tactics prepared by Changfeng are based on the level that Fifen had shown before. Now, first of all, Shen Fei's performance is better, and secondly, the elusive Zheng Qi has shown a threat and lethality that is higher than the highest level they had expected before. The frontal attack can play the role of on-the-spot tactics and strong impact. Hiding in the back, it can command teammates to attack, and at the same time can constantly harass the opponent's defense line. Li Cheng's, who has the same offensive ability as Lu Xiaoshan, how can you fight against such a player? Zheng Qi had not shown such an outstanding level before, and in this game, he gradually showed it. This is the key to Fifen's current disadvantage. They prepared a lot of backhands, but at this moment, any backhands will not work, because Zheng Qi's performance has exceeded any height they prepared. We only have one way to go now, that is to rush out and fight them all the way to the end. Lu Xiaoshan said lightly in the team channel. His words made all the players of Changfeng look at him. Our backhand is useless. Next, we just have to fight hard to see if we can win. The extraordinary level is beyond our expectations. The level shown by Zheng Qi in this game has completely surpassed us. However, not every game is won by the strongest side. There are many things that affect the outcome. There will also be many factors in this game. At this point, Lu Xiaoshan paused for a moment, and then said, I don't know what factors can make us win. No one knows. But what I know is that only by continuing to attack can we have a chance. I don't want to lose the championship this year, because since I became your captain, I have never lacked championships. No problem, captain, let us accompany you to win a championship this year. The players of Changfeng shouted loudly. Their admiration and respect for Lu Xiaoshan are unquestionable, and they are no less than the admiration and respect of the players of Tin He for Li Qing's. Very good, let's have a good game and kill them. Lu Xiaoshan waved his fist and said. The players of Changfeng responded in unison, with great momentum. Oh, they are full of momentum. Zheng Qi couldn't help but mutter as he watched the Changfeng players waving their fists from a distance. Of course, this is Changfeng, it's impossible that they don't have such a strong momentum. Shen Fei replied. Then find a way to kill them. Such opponents are worthy of our glorious five-time champions. Zheng Qi waved his fist and said. Like Lu Xiaoshan, Zheng Qi's words immediately made the Fifen players start waving their fists wildly. He also has a supreme position in the minds of the Fifen players. Although he usually seems to be very frivolous and the Fifen players seem to lack respect for him, at this time, everyone knows that Zheng Qi is their backbone. At the last moment of the game, both sides need to give their best. The last moment, the last contest. Winning this game means that Fifin basically has 4 championships in hand. If you can't get this championship, then the next 2 championships may be lost. Without the 5-time champion, there is no meaning. Even though the league championship is very valuable, much more valuable than the cup competition, at this moment, the importance of the China Cup final seems to have surpassed everything. Changfeng launched a fierce attack. Fifin quickly launched a defensa. For Changfeng, the only thing they can do at this time is to attack, focusing on the middle, with Lu Xiaoshan and Deixing as the spearhead, tearing open the opponent's defensa. With all the main players on the field, Changfeng can rely on these 2 core players the most. However, they have made some changes in the lineup. He Jing and Wen Xiang appeared at the same time, and Changfeng sent 2 auxiliary core players on the field. This is a rare thing. Every club will have no shortage of auxiliary core players. After all, the game cannot be separated from such players. No matter whether the level is poor or good, they need to pay their own level in the game, so any club will have 2 auxiliary core players, which is easier to rotate. For example, the supporting cores of Fifin are Su Jing and Tang Ziyuan, but Tang Ziyuan's level is average and he doesn't play much. Su Jing's playing time is quite long, and he only takes a break occasionally. Anyway, the energy consumed by the supporting core is not particularly much, and he can support it if he plays more often. Most teams are like this, because it is actually very difficult to find 2 equally outstanding supporting cores. It is good to have a reliable one, and the other one will generally choose a supporting core with not very good strength, but young and potential. In this way, the main force will lead and slowly become the next main force, and you can lead newcomers. This is a very good approach. Of course, this is also a theoretical approach. Not every club will be so lucky to be able to cycle continuously, and have the opportunity to have 2 outstanding supporting cores, so of course they will use them. Changfeng now has 2 outstanding supporting cores. Wen Xiang is one of the few who can become a god-level player as an auxiliary, and He Jing is a rising star with a very outstanding performance. So in Changfeng, the 2 of them basically share the playing time equally. This does not compress Wen Xiang's playing time. After all, the less playing time, the more concentrated the energy in the game, which is very important for any player. But now, Changfeng has sent both of them to the field. This is very unusual. Everyone knows that support can bring endurance. The more supports there are, the less worry about skill cooldown, which can make teammates more brave. But why until now, any club has only 2 supports, and let them rotate? It is because supports are supports after all, and they do not have the ability to confront head-on. At the same time, they often have defects such as poor escape ability, need protection, slow movement, etc. In intensive confrontations, such players often need at least 1 or 2 teammates to protect them, so that the support can better return to the whole team. In such a situation, it is easy for one person to be targeted by the opponent, let alone 2. Think about it, put 2 supports on the field, and then send 4 people to protect them. Even if the remaining 4 people cannot be killed, they can't stand the opponent's attack. The tactic of using 2 or more assistants has always been tried, but it always fails miserably. Even the idea of giving everyone 1 or 2 recovery skills to form a full staff assistant has been tried before, but in intensive games, such part-time assistants still cannot find the most suitable recovery object in the chaos, and at the same time, it also reduces the offensive pressure of the team, thus benefiting the opponent. So now, why did Changfeng choose such a candidate? Chapter 894. Temporary Defensa. Changfeng's advance was also very fast. With 2 assistants, they still reached the center line only a little later than Fifin. After the 2 sides collided in the center circle, Fifin would certainly not be polite, and they quickly entangled with Changfeng. The opponent had 2 assistants, so they were naturally much weaker in a head-on attack. This was their good opportunity. However, after the first contact, they soon discovered why Changfeng chose to use such a double assistant tactic. There was only 1 player protecting them, and the other players were all on the front line, fighting against Fifin bravely. Although such a confrontation would still be at a disadvantage, because they were 1 less person after all, with the support behind them, they gradually turned this disadvantage back. The reason is very simple. When the 2 sides were entangled, Wen Xiang and He Jing, in addition to constantly using recovery skills, were also constantly using interference skills and large-scale lethal skills. The 2 of them cooperated very well. When Wen Xiang used the recovery skill, He Jing began to constantly throw interference skills, and when He Jing began to use the recovery skill, Wen Xiang began to constantly throw large-scale lethal skills. Obviously, they only brought at most 2 other hero cards, because their interference skills and large-scale killing skills, thrown back and forth, are only 5 or 6 skills, but by taking turns to cover, they can better sustain their teammates while also allowing the offensive level of the front field to not drop too much. FIFA is not without such players, but they are full-time output players, and the support is given to Zheng alone. Usually, relying on Zheng's support, the whole team has no problem, but now in this situation, because there is more skill cooling time to recover, Zheng's attack began to play more and more bravely. They kept attacking and were not afraid of exchanging injuries, so that Zheng needed to speed up her recovery rhythm when recovering. Her rhythm was originally very complete, but now it was accelerated, and there were some problems immediately. It was not that the output had a problem, but after speeding up, her rhythm was disrupted. When the last skill was thrown out, the next skill had not yet cooled down. Just when Zheng's recovery rhythm was interrupted, Zheng launched a fierce attack at the same time. The 2 sides who had been in a stalemate before suddenly changed dramatically. The physical energy at the FIFA players dropped to the bottom in a flash, and the Zheng players were similar. However, a skill soon fell, and they immediately became full of energy, while the FIFA defensor collapsed in an instant. Only 4 core players escaped successfully, but when they were defeated as a whole, their retreat was useless. After being chased all the way to their own gate, the FIFA defensor could not hold on for too long. Under the change of terrain, the space for their activities became so small, which was also a kind of behavior close to suicide. 2 minutes later, Zheng, who attacked steadily, scored a goal and tied the score again. "I didn't control the rhythm well," Zheng said in the team channel. "It has nothing to do with you. The Zheng guys really have a conspiracy. I didn't expect this tactic to work, but it's just this time. Next time we can play more fiercely. They used 2 auxiliary cores, and their ability to confront head-on will still be much worse. We were just caught off guard," Zheng Qi said. FIFA's players nodded one after another. Everyone agreed with this statement. 1 less offensive player means 1 less offensive player. This cannot be compensated by long-range skills. If FIFA had not been caught off guard, their tactics would not have been able to be deployed so well. However, it is obvious that special tactics like Zheng will only be used once. It is enough to take advantage once. They will not be greedy and want to take advantage again. This kind of backhand is originally used at critical moments. If you can score a goal, it will be considered a victory. However, even if it is not used again, it will make FIFA think more when considering it, which is also a kind of victory. There are only 7 minutes left in the game. We must attack patiently and seize this attack. Do you understand? Zheng Qi said in the team channel. No problem. FIFA's players nodded one after another. They were waiting for this moment. It was the last moment. If FIFA did not score a goal in this attack, then the situation would be very passive. If the opponent scored a goal and overtook at the last moment, then there would be no chance to catch up. If FIFA scores this time, their advantage will be huge. Even if they set up layers of defense and keep blocking, they can still use up the last few minutes. This is the advantage of kicking off first in the second half. Of course, the premise is that you have to maintain at least a draw in the first half. Can FIFA maintain the little advantage he gained in the first half until the end? No one knows this. However, FIFA's players have absolute confidence and fighting spirit at this moment, and can defeat their opponents in the confrontation. The game resumed, and FIFA launched an attack. Both sides began to move towards the center circle at the same time. The speed of both sides moving was not slow, but compared with the previous time, there was nothing special. Near the center circle, the two sides met. As soon as he saw the opponent's lineup, Lu Xiaoshan cursed in his heart, and then signaled his teammates to withdraw one after another, relying on the tents and preparing to defend. It's not that he is too cowardly, but in this situation, he can only choose to be conservative. Because as soon as he came into contact, Lu Xiaoshan saw 10 FIFA players. This number is normal. 11 players appearing, seeing 10 in front is too normal. However, among these 10 people, there is no Zheng Qi. Is it possible that Zheng Qi will not play at this time? Absolutely impossible. Then Zheng Qi is hiding somewhere, ready to attack at any time. Then the opponent will come up, that is, 11. There is no goalkeeper, all are offensive players. This approach is quite common in the game. After all, the offensive side can take advantage of some of the offensive players if there is one more person, but in fact, in the top league, this approach is very rare, because under the opponent's blockade, The offensive will encounter many problems, unless it is to the point of burning the boats, otherwise there will be no goalkeeper. In case of a little mistake, the opponent can directly hang the empty goal, then it will be too late to cry. However, in this case, the attack of burning the boats is like this: it is possible to gamble, and such gambling is not uncommon. Has the final battle moment arrived? It seems a little early, Lucian thought in his heart. He felt that it was a little early. Of course there was a reason. There were 7 minutes left in the game. With the offensive level of both sides, it is very likely that each of them would score a goal in the next time. If you start to go all out now, you may make mistakes at the last moment. However, it is normal to start the decisive battle now. With Fifan's offensive ability, through constant suppression and steady attack, it is not impossible to consume as much time as possible while scoring goals. However, this approach is very risky. After all, the offensive itself depends on luck. If you have the opportunity, you must attack, so that you can score better. If you want to attack in the last few seconds like playing basketball before, and don't leave the opponent a chance to counter-attack, then it is easier to lose the opportunity to attack. If Fifan really thinks so, then it will be easier to resist their attack this time. If Fifan keeps attacking patiently, Zheng will dare to defend patiently without revealing any flaws. Even if neither side scores in the end, it will enter overtime. If it really enters overtime, it will be a good thing for Zheng. They have rested longer than Fifan, so of course they are more adapted to the next game. After overtime, their physical advantage will be more outstanding. Let's stabilize, don't rush, try to stop their pace, and prepare to retreat if we can't hold them off, understand? Lucian said in the team channel. The players of Zheng nodded one after another. They were very confident about this. As for defensa, although this kind of map is not particularly advantageous to defend, as long as we can stabilize it and delay time, we can still do it. Lucian and Zheng will no longer entangle with Shinrofei and Lieshbo, but start to intercept with the help of their teammates. They didn't do it before because this approach is conservative and does not conform to the characteristics of Zheng. But at this time, if they defend temporarily, they can also have a copper wall and iron wall defense like Nanguo. Although Zheng no longer has the flourishing talent of the past 2 years, the overall level is still not bad. Lucian, Zheng, Liuan, Feng2, these are all very strong players. With the young players trained by Zheng Qi, Miran, etc. Zheng has actually quietly completed the task of renewal. Only half of the famous 8 Great Kings are still in the team, and the new additions are all young and promising players. Even if they can't win the championship this year, it can be expected that they will be able to become more competitive again next year. And Zheng has another advantage, that is, they have always been on the front line of competing for the championship, and they can get enough training in every game. In this way, their newcomers have a lot more opportunities to receive training, and they can also grow faster. At the same time, gaining a foothold in a strong team is also a good training for the temperament of newcomers. At least Jin, Miran, Zheng Qi, and other young people who fought with Zheng Qi in District 108 at the time have grown into the backbone of Zheng. Of course, what's a bit frustrating is that the attributes of these people are a little weak. If they were not in the same new warrior with Fifan and his gang, they might have a chance to impact the position of god-level players, but now, there is no hope. Chapter 895. Pitfall. Facing Fifan's attack, Zheng's defensa was quite solid. Because they had been mentally prepared for a long time, Zheng's defensa was very patient. When they were fighting each other before, they could not weaken their momentum. Their energy was more focused on offensa, and defensa was mainly based on substitute players. Now it was the final moment of the decisive battle, and all the main players of Zheng were on the field. It was naturally nothing to defend with peace of mind. They didn't like defensa, but when they really had to defend patiently, the effect of defensa was still quite outstanding. If Fifan wanted to delay time, then Lucian would let Fifan's players know that delaying time was just a dead end. But it was obvious that Fifan didn't seem to want to delay time. Their goalkeeper was useless, and they sent out all 11 attackers. Isn't it to break the opponent's gate as quickly as possible in the attack? Whether a team wants a quick battle or wants to delay time, others may not be able to see it, but Lucian, who is on the front line and has a keen sense of battlefield, can see it at a glance. He soon felt that Fifan didn't seem to want to delay time at all. On the contrary, they played quite tough in the attack. Such momentum is certainly not to delay time, but to make a quick decision. Hurry up and attack. Let's attack once and leave a few minutes for them to launch the final attack. Is that confident enough? Lu Xiaoshan commanded the whole team to retreat steadily, thinking in his heart while retreating. Fifan attacked so fiercely and had the advantage in numbers. It was difficult to confront them head-on. They had to retreat gradually and wear down their offensive will, so that they would have a chance to stop the opponent's fierce attack. However, just when Zheng Qi began to retreat, Zheng Qi, who had been invisible before, quietly appeared behind their retreat. At the same time, the Fifan players in front began a fierce concentrated fire. However, unlike the last time, Zheng Qi was already prepared at this moment, and Zheng Qi alone could not hold out for too long. After resisting for a while, Zheng Qi was besieged by 4 Zheng Qi players and killed instantly. During this period, half of Zheng Qi's players also died under the opponent's fierce attack, but after all, they were not completely wiped out. They began to retreat quickly and then set up a second line of defense halfway. Fifan didn't pursue him relentlessly this time. They slowed down the pace of their attack, waiting for Zheng Qi to pass the cooling period and then return to the court. This approach is also normal. After all, if they force the attack, even if they can break through the opponent's second line of defense, they will encounter the opponent's interception in front of the goal. It is better to rest. They didn't delay that time, but objectively, the attack takes a lot of time, Lu Xiaoshan thought to himself. At this time, he was a little confused. After asking Wen Xiang also shook her head. She also couldn't figure out why Fifan would adopt this tactic that seemed normal, but it was a little abnormal at this time. Maybe they just didn't think too much. They can attack if they can, and score if they can. We can't be distracted if we keep playing like this, Lu Xiaoshan said in the team channel. He could only think of this now. After all, in the fierce game, there are almost no people who can remain calm and considerate as they are off the court. Maybe there is only one Li Qing's. Including the coach Luo Qishuan on the sidelines, he couldn't think of the reason why the other party did this. After all, a lot of his energy was also put on directing the game. However, at this time, facing Fifan's fierce attack, they could not be distracted, which was also a reason. Li Qing's, who was watching the game, seemed to see something. Does Fifan have the confidence to defend against Zheng Qing's attack in the next period of time? It is not impossible. Although Zheng Qing's attack is very fierce, if he continues to exchange pieces, Fifan can better play his own characteristics. Li Qing's thought silently in his heart, in a melee, Fifan will suffer some losses, especially in defense. Their substitutes can only achieve good results when they're standing still. In the previous defense, both sides were in a melee, and Fifan's attribute point advantage could not be played well. Even if Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing were entangled, they could not resist it. But now, Fifan is on all the main forces. In such a situation, they will play a better level in defense. In such a situation, it seems that it is not impossible to hold on for a few minutes. What's more, Fifan's current attack looks imposing, but in fact it is very cautious. It hits one checkpoint after another, and the rest time alone wastes a lot of time. And they wasted it reasonably, so Zheng Qi had no doubts. Fifan really couldn't be dragged into overtime. In overtime, their physical disadvantage would burst out, but now they have taken enough initiative in the 90-minute game. Of course, whether they can take the lead next depends on their performance. After a short break, they launched an attack again. It was only a little more than a minute since they started attacking the first line of defense. Compared with the rhythm of the attack just now, it was a little slower, but compared with the first half, it was much faster. Of course, on such a map, the rhythm of the second half is faster than the first half, otherwise it is easy to be disturbed by the changes in the map. When they were resting just now, they had avoided a change in the map. There should be a period of calm next. They took advantage of this time to launch a fierce attack. Head-on attack, sideways penetration, constant cutting, and then knocking Zheng Qing's players out of the field one by one. Zheng Qi is no longer invisible, but appears on the front line, cooperating with Shen Ruofei and others to launch a fierce attack. Fifan's advantage in attack began to be fully utilized. After half of the players left the field, Zheng Qi could only retreat again. And there were also many Fifan players who left the field. They continued to rest, recover their health, and waited for the skills to cool down. After a while, they launched a third attack. Now, they finally came to Zheng Qing's door. After being broken by Fifan's defense line continuously, Zheng Qi certainly would not watch the third line of defense being easily broken by Fifan. They also want to save face. Now the main players are on the field. If Fifan is not so careful in attacking, they just need to refresh the football again, then the victory will belong to them. The previous show of weakness was waiting for such an opportunity. This is also one of the bad hands left by Zheng Qi. If you do it at such a critical moment, it will often have a good effect. Their tactics were not complicated. It was nothing more than paying attention to who was controlling the ball when resisting the opponent's attack. Generally speaking, it would be Su Jing. As the core of the auxiliary, Su Jing was located closer to the front line. With Lu Xiaoshen's level, with the assistance of Daixing, it was still possible to complete a small decapitation operation and refresh the ball. This would be Cheng Feng's chance to get the ball again and launch a counterattack. Even if he couldn't get the ball, Fifen's attack would have to be reorganized. The remaining time might not allow Fifen to complete the attack again. By then, if he persisted until the overtime, Cheng Feng would gradually gain the advantage on the field. Fifen started to attack. They didn't delay much time. Now there were more than 4 minutes left before the end of the game, which was not a good number. However, Fifen didn't seem to care. They were still attacking in an orderly manner. Su Jing was organizing from behind, Shen Renofei and others were attacking from the front, Zheng Qi was coordinating from behind, and with the support of Zheng Qi, Niao and others' large-scale skills, and Liu Shibo's defense and protection, their attack was also quite powerful. After compressing Cheng Feng's activity space step by step, their attack began to become more fierce. At this time, of course, they had to launch an attack in one breath and open up the offensive channel, so that they could score a goal. If the attack is fierce, it is inevitable that they will relax a little in protecting themselves. Lu Xiaoshen and Daixing were waiting for this moment. Of course, the assistance of others is indispensable. When Daixing suddenly rushed forward, the players of Cheng Feng immediately began their own assistance. When Xiang's recovery skills began to fall on Daixing's head, but she prepared another skill to assist Lu Xiaoshen next. At the same time, the other players of Cheng Feng also launched a counterattack almost at the same time, involving other people and Fifen. Daixing rushed into Fifen's formation, and then he was entangled by Liu Shibo, but his impact still attracted everyone's attention. The next moment, Lu Xiaoshen's operation level completely exploded. Shen Renofei, who was originally entangled with him, was knocked away by his sudden burst of operation. In order to avoid Lu Xiaoshen's pursuit, Shen Renofei could only choose to retreat temporarily. Lu Xiaoshen did not pursue, but quickly cut into the line that Daixing rushed out. Bin Shikai wanted to interfere with him from the side, but was forced away by his continuous attack. After forcing away, Lu Xiaoshen was not far from Su Jing. He could almost see Su Jing's panic. Soon, he rushed to Su Jing's side. With his operating level, it would take less than 2 seconds to kill Su Jing. However, after just one look, Lu Xiaoshen was stunned, and then turned and retreated. He did not see the football. Su Jing did not control the ball, and Fifen hit the football somewhere else. Behind Su Jing were 2 long-range attackers, Niao and Zheng Qi, but Lu Xiaoshen had no time to attack those 2 people. This is a pit. Unfortunately, it was too late for Lu Xiaoshen to retreat at this moment. Shen Renofei and Bin Shikai, who were knocked away by him but did not die, had already surrounded him from both sides, and he himself had already penetrated into Fifen's formation. In this case, even the gods could not save him. Chapter 896 Necessary Calmness. Lu Xiaoshen died in frustration. Daixing also died at the same time as him. In order to refresh the football, the 2 core players of Cheng Feng also penetrated into Fifen's defense line at the same time. This gamble was worth it. If the football could be refreshed, it didn't matter if they died. Moreover, if the football was refreshed, no one would want to kill the opponent first. Such a kill would be meaningless. However, if the football could not be refreshed, the consequences would be more tragic. The 2 core players were taken away in one wave. The other Cheng Feng players could not stop Fifen's wolf-like attack. Just a few seconds later, Fifen broke through Cheng Feng's gate and took the lead again. 8-7, Fifen led. There was still a little more than 3 minutes left before the end of the game. This time was actually enough to bring a goal. Fifen should start defense, Li Qing's thought silently in his heart. This was indeed the case. If Fifen could hold on to the last 3 minutes, he would be able to win the China Cup and their 3rd championship this season. Okay, now it's time for us to start defense. Zheng Qi smiled. Fifen's players knocked at one after another. Of course, more means were needed to launch defense at this time. Fifen was also well prepared for this time. Although they did not have much time to prepare, or even very little, they still squeezed out time to carry out a special and thorough defensive tactic. For a game, there are too many possible situations, but Fifen has a specific plan. What the opponent has in mind, Zheng Qi, Zhu Shan, Meng Fan, and even Chen Feng who is far away in City B, Fifen has deduced a lot of possibilities. When Fifan's advantage is obvious, Chen Feng and Meng Fan unanimously believe that the opponent will use a tactic of back and forth, and then use some prepared detailed tactics to look for opportunities in the second half. Luo Qixuan is undoubtedly a top head coach, but he does not know that he is facing not only Zhu Shan, who has nothing special in overall tactics, but also Chen Feng, who is very familiar with him, and Meng Fan, who is unknown but has an extremely good overall view. Chen Feng has always been the top head coach. He and Cheng Feng have played against each other more than once or twice. How to fight against Cheng Feng is also a question he has been thinking about. In the past games, Nangyue always failed because it lacked players who could fight against Lu Xiaoshan. However, in last year's league, Nangyue defeated the powerful Cheng Feng twice in the league. In addition to the tactical advantage, Chen Feng's research and familiarity with Cheng Feng is also a key factor. According to Chen Feng's idea, the next season is when Nangyue really starts to sprint. However, due to team reasons, he lost this opportunity, and Nangyue also lost its own opportunity. But at this time, Chen Feng's previous preparations were all taken advantage of by Fifan. This is also that key factor that Fifan is very confident about this. They did not have enough time to prepare for the game, but in the overall situation, they did not lack anything, but had a huge advantage. No matter how outstanding Luo Qixuan was, he could not have thought that Chen Feng would still set them up at this time. Fifan almost followed Cheng Feng's ideas, and then at the last moment, they revealed their true intentions. That is to play steadily, advance steadily, never make mistakes, and use defense to solve the opponent at the last moment. This is something Cheng Feng did not expect. If he had thought of this earlier, Cheng Feng would definitely not play so steadily, and would definitely attack more crazily, dragging the game into a chaotic battle, trying to win in the chaos. But now, they have lost such an opportunity. Now Luo Qixuan is sitting on the bench, frowning tightly. Seeing Fifan's current posture, Luo Qixuan can certainly see that the opponent wants this effect, the last defensor, to drag the game time. This style is not Fifan's style, but seems to be the style of another old opponent. Is it you, Chen Feng, actually setting me up at this time? If you sit in the opponent's coaching seat, I will guard against this, but now, how could I have thought that you would secretly assist Fifan? Thinking of this, Luo Qixuan couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. This is indeed something he didn't expect, which made him suffer a big loss in his preparations. You have to know that although Cheng Feng has 1 or 2 weeks more preparation time than Fifan, no matter how well prepared, it can only be prepared based on what it knows now. Chen Feng's intervention is a variable that can definitely turn the situation around, but it is a variable that Cheng Feng has never expected. Now this variable has brought huge benefits to Fifan and huge damage to Cheng Feng. As long as we can score a goal in less than 3 minutes, the final victory will still be ours. Lu Xiaoshan's voice sounded in Cheng Feng's team channel, as cold as a piece of ice. This is not that he is deliberately pretending, but at this time, Lu Xiaoshan has become more calm, extraordinary calm. This is his characteristic. In the eyes of the outside world, among the 2 top players now, Li Qing's is water and Lu Xiaoshan is fire. Water is the softest thing in the world, just like Li Qing's game style, extremely calm, gradually entangled with you, making you lose hope of victory unknowingly. And Lu Xiaoshan, like a raging fire, always marches forward bravely and bravely defeats all opponents in front of him. Under such a comparison, it is easy to make people feel that Li Qing's is calmer in the game, while Lu Xiaoshan is more aggressive in the game. But what is the reality? Lu Xiaoshan's accomplishment is also extremely outstanding. He can always remain absolutely calm in that game. The more unfavorable that game is, the calmer he is. The reason is very simple. Only by being calm can you win. For a player like Lu Xiaoshan who regards victory as his life, he can do anything for victory. On the contrary, when he has a great advantage, he is a little jumpy in the game, and often does some very casual things, such as rushing to the opponent's large force alone, killing 2 or 3 players of the opponent and then being killed by others. These things that seem very willful, Li Qing's will not do, so in comparison, it seems that Lu Xiaoshan sometimes appears very impulsive in the game. But this does not prevent Lu Xiaoshan from being calmer than most players at critical moments. At this time, Fifan has already revealed his true intentions. After that, the other players of Cheng Feng are a little confused, but Lu Xiaoshan grasped the most critical point at the first time. It is the next attack. If they can score by tearing through the opponent's defense with fierce attacks, then Fifan will not be able to break through Cheng Feng's gate in the remaining time, and the game will be dragged into overtime. In overtime, it will be Cheng Feng's world, and their advantage in energy will be fully demonstrated. Maybe in overtime, Fifin will not be as tired as everyone imagines, but in fact, in such a situation, Fifin has always had to do with to win within 90 minutes. If such a goal is not achieved, it will be very morale-breaking, and at the same time, most of Fifin's players will suffer serious setbacks. In such a situation, Fifin certainly has no chance of winning in overtime. This is also a gamble. Fifin bets within 90 minutes, while Zheng has relatively more choices, but it is also because they have enough choices that they are forced into such a desperate situation. This is also a very delicate situation. Both sides have bet all their chips, and this will be the final trump card. Now that the trump card has been revealed, it is still unknown who will win and who will lose. Fifin's trump cards have all been revealed, and Zheng still has one last chance, which is to make his trump cards bigger than Fifin's before revealing them. This seems unlikely, but it is possible. To make his trump cards bigger, Zheng needs to score a goal in the remaining time. It is not easy to understand this, especially when you are in the game. You must know that Luo Qixuan's emotions just now changed drastically because he thought that Chen Feng might have shot silently from behind, so he did not notice this at the first time. You must know that there is not much time left in the game. In less than 3 minutes, if there is some hesitation or confusion, then the game time will pass quickly, and Zheng will not have any chance at all. They have Lu Xiaoshan, which is their luck. It was Lu Xiaoshan's voice at the first time that made the whole team find their backbone again. Lu Xiaoshan's words not only awakened the other players in the team, but also awakened Luo Qixuan. Yes, at this time, you can't worry about gains and losses, let alone be indecisive. What you need to do is to launch a fierce attack during this period of time and strive to score a goal. At this time, Luo Qixuan also found an opportunity, or a place that can be used. Fifin must want to use all the main players to complete the rest of the game. This approach is of course no problem, it can cover up their overall shortcomings, but at the same time, it also makes Fifin's players very fixed. Fifin can only use those people. But Zheng can make some targeted arrangements. Soon, Luo Qixuan made personnel arrangements, and Zheng's players came on the court one after another and launched an attack. They want to launch an attack and score a goal in the remaining time. Chapter 897. Face to face. Zheng's offensive formation quickly advanced to the vicinity of the center circle. Although they knew that time was precious, Zheng still did not reveal any flaws in the process of advancing. More haste makes waste. Lu Xiaoshan understood this principle, and all Zheng's players also understood it. The more times like this, the more you can't be anxious. Advancing requires a whole, not just relying on one person rushing blindly. Facing such a terrible opponent like Fifin, such calmness is especially needed. Zheng has never encountered such a strong opponent before. Maybe Zheng was so outstanding in the past 2 years, but it is not as good as Fifin now. In every aspect, it is almost perfect. Almost perfect means that although Fifin still has some defects that cannot be made up, such defects cannot be used by the opponent, so of course it is perfect. For example, at this time, Fifin's defect of insufficient substitute level will basically not be shown at this time. They will use all the main players to play the rest of the game. Even if Zheng knows which players they are going to use, what use can it be? Knowing the composition of the opponent's personnel and being able to use the opponent's personnel composition to score goals are two different things. At least, when seeing Fifin's defensive formation, Zheng's players knew that the next attack would be very difficult. Outside the small open space in the middle circle, there are 5 passages leading to the next blocking location. This is why in the confrontation in the middle circle, if one side is repelled, it must retreat continuously. If it does not retreat, the opponent can bypass your interception and launch an attack from other passages. Of course, you can also guard these 5 passages separately, but 10 players can only be divided into 2 players in one passage at most. Under the impact of the opponent's advantage, you can't defend for too long. It can even be said that it is just a slight delay of the opponent's pursuit. Therefore, the battles that take place in the passages are basically battles that take place on the way of retrieve to delay the opponent's offensive, which usually does not happen. However, Fifin's current defensive formation is somewhat different from the usual defensive formation. Shen Ruofei, Zheng Qi, Liu Shibo, Bin Shiqiang, Ban Yuanfen and Li Gurui were indeed at the center, but behind them, Su Jin, Niao Liwa, Zheng Shu and Zheng Hai were hiding in the passage, ready to provide remote support at any time. This tactic seemed quite strange, but as soon as they met, Lu Xiaoshan sensed the murderous intent hidden in the opponent's tactic. For Fifan, their current level is quite good, especially their high-end strength, and in addition to the 4 core players, the 2 young players Li Gurui and Wang Yuanfeng have also gradually made their own reputations. They both have the same characteristics, that is, fast. This kind of fast is not achieved by adding points to the attributes, but a natural quality, which allows them to shoot faster in the actions on the field. At the same time, in addition to being fast, the operations of these 2 people are very accurate, which also allows their level to improve very quickly. Fifan is firmly in the second echelon, that is, below the 4 cores, which is better than the average Super League players. With their attribute advantages, they are already close to the position of demigod players. Now the 2 of them and the 4 core players are blocking in the middle circle, and the fighting power they can show is enough to compete with Zheng Qi. And with the support behind them, they can perform even better. Of course, no matter how strong and outstanding they are always a minority against the majority of the opponent, and they will eventually be killed one after another, especially in such a confrontation. If the core is killed, the next step may be 1,000 miles of collapse, and finally lose the ball. However, that is under normal circumstances. Fifan's job now is not to prevent the opponent from scoring, but to prevent the opponent from scoring within these 3 minutes. This makes a big difference. At least in the middle circle, they can consume more time and longer time of the opponent. Go. Lu Xiaoshan didn't say anything nonsense, but just shouted this sentence in the team channel. The opponent clearly wants to consume time, so he can't hesitate. If he can defeat the opponent within 2 minutes, then this attack can still be fought. In Lu Xiaoshan's calculation, the opponent's move was to decide the outcome in the middle circle. In this case, if they defeated the opponent within 2 minutes, then they would not be able to organize a better defense line at the second line of defense. Zheng Qi would break through, and then they would only face the last line of defense in front of the goal. If it was just the line of defense in front of the goal, then Lu Xiaoshan was confident that he could defeat the opponent's defense line within 1 minute. After all, in that case, the opponent's space for movement was too small and they could not escape at all. The key to this attack was in the next 2 minutes. The key to the outcome of the whole game was also in the next 2 minutes. Under Lu Xiaoshan's command, Zheng Qi immediately burst out with all their fighting spirit and desire to fight. Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing took the lead, while Shen Renofei and Liu Shibo immediately intercepted them. Of course, the other people in Zheng Qi would not watch their 2 cores being entangled by the opponent. You must know that with Zheng Qi's current personnel combination, they have to surround these 2 cores to be able to exert their strongest strength. Without the assistance of these 2 cores, their attack will be discounted. So, when Shen Renofei and Liu Shibo came up, Feng Tu and Zhuo Xinjiang, who came out from the flank, immediately showed their ability to assist. After making a circle from the side, they stopped Shen Renofei and Liu Shibo. Although Feng Tu was beaten back by the aggressive Shen Renofei as soon as they met, they successfully prevented Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing from being intercepted. Lu Xiaoshan was not idle. He began to issue orders one by one in the team channel. Under his distribution, the players of Zheng Qi began to intercept the players of Fifan one by one. Bin Shiqiang, Li Gurui, and Wang Yuanfeng were all intercepted by the players of Zheng Qi. Although they did not make them fight on their own, they at least involved enough of their energy. 7 against 5, this is not a big advantage, not to mention that there are Su Jing and others in the back to support. So even in the face of the opponent's numerical advantage, Shen Renofei and his team can hold on. However, the Fifan fans in the stands were already worried. Because when the others were entangled and had no energy to do anything else, the 2 core members of Zheng Qi, Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing, did not participate in the overall confrontation, but simultaneously targeted the extraordinary Captain Zheng Qi. Lu Xiaoshan and Daixing, Lu Xiaoshan in front, Daixing on the side, ready to cut off Zheng Qi's retreat at any time. The 2 rushed towards Zheng Qi at the same time. Can Zheng Qi withstand the opponent's attack? Almost everyone thought that he couldn't stand it. Although it was not difficult to fight to Zheng Qi's level, it also depended on who he was fighting. If it was against 2 ordinary Super League players, everyone was confident that Zheng Qi would definitely be able to hold on for a long time, and maybe he could kill back. If it was against 2 Class A players, then Zheng Qi would definitely be able to kill back. Zheng Qi had already shown his level several times in the Class A League, not to mention that Zheng Qi was more mature and more outstanding now. But if facing 2 god-level players, even if the extraordinary players have confidence in Zheng Qi, they dare not say that Zheng Qi can support the opponent's attack for more than 2 minutes. God-level players are not cabbages. There are only more than 30 people in the entire league, who can basically represent the highest individual level of the entire league. Even if the best one faces the weakest one, it may not necessarily win, let alone 1 against 2. And one of the 2 god-level players on the other side is Lu Xiaoshan. Only a madman would think that Zheng Qi can hold on for a long time under such circumstances. Zheng Qi's first reaction is to run away. This is a very normal first reaction. Facing the attack of Lu Xiaoshan and Xing, it is a fool not to run. However, Zheng Qi soon found that there was no place to run. This area itself is a very narrow area, and there are not many places to move. The confrontation between other people occupies a large area. If Zheng Qi wants to escape again, he will give up 2 of the 5 passages. In this case, if the passage is given up, then any one of Lu Xiaoshan and Xing who rushes in can kill Su Jin who is there. At the time, without the help of the auxiliary, Fifan can't even hold on for half a minute. So he can't retreat. The next moment, he and Lu Xiaoshan collided with each other. The 2 met and shot continuously. Zheng Qi had already demonstrated his frontal attack ability before. In the game, when he occasionally launched a frontal attack, the offensive level he showed was no less than Qinruo Fei. This is of course a surprising thing. After all, in the past few years, Qinruo Fei has shown his level in the top league. Everyone recognizes that in terms of frontal advancement, Qinruo Fei is already the top level. Especially this year, the ability he showed in frontal advancement is only slightly inferior to Lu Xiaoshan, and is stronger than anyone else. Zheng Qi was able to tie with Qinruo Fei in a link that was not his best, which was enough to make people feel extremely surprised. And now, he was facing the well-deserved number 1 Lu Xiaoshan. What could Zheng Qi do in a head-on confrontation? Many people were looking forward to this scene, but since the start of the game, Zheng Qi rarely attacked head-on. He only supported from the side, and the task of entangled Lu Xiaoshan was given to Qinruo Fei, so he didn't have many opportunities to confront Lu Xiaoshan head-on. Now, Zheng Qi had no way to avoid it, and he had to face Lu Xiaoshan's threat head-on. Chapter 898. Surprising! Not only are many fans looking forward to this moment, but Yuan Fei is also looking forward to it. Yuan Fei has always admired Zheng Qi. As a commentator who retired from a top player, Yuan Fei's vision is better than many people. Especially after paying attention to Zheng Qi early on, Yuan Fei found that this player was a little different from others. He is not from a professional background, but can be said to be a wild one, but his operation is very precise and there are no mistakes. This makes him have a professional level, but his thinking is not imprisoned by professional training. Instead, he has many wonderful ideas that only amateur players have. In terms of style, he is also very peculiar. When he is on the court, he can do almost everything. Although he let everyone know this year, he is best at hiding on the side and suddenly using a surprise attack and a perfect tactical quality to make a breakthrough, but in other aspects, he can do it very well, whether it is frontal attack or retrieve defensa, or even assisting the attack, he can do it at the top level. This is a player without shortcomings. A real all-rounder. Many people's so-called omnipotence is just being able to do everything, but there is only one aspect that can reach the top level, but this alone is enough to make him an excellent player, and even if that aspect can reach a very high level, then he can become a god-level player. But Zheng Qi is not like this. His omnipotence is truly omnipotent. Any aspect has reached a very top level, let alone the aspect he is best at. Such a player may be able to reach the real peak. This is what Yuan Fei has been thinking about. Now Zheng Qi is facing the impact of Lu Xiaoshan, what can he do? Yuan Fei has confidence in Zheng Qi, but at this time, Yuan Fei can't have real confidence. Because Zheng Qi is not fighting against Lu Xiaoshan at this moment, with his current level, even if he fights against Lu Xiaoshan, he can hold on for a long time. Maybe if he is not careful, Lu Xiaoshan will lose to Zheng Qi, because at this level, the victory or defeat is often just a matter of millimeters. However, Lu Xiaoshan is not fighting alone at this moment, and he has Xing to assist him. In this case, even if Yuan Fei has confidence in Zheng Qi, it is hard to believe how long Zheng Qi can support. However, when they came into direct contact, the level Zheng Qi showed still shocked many people. At the moment of contact, Zheng Qi, like Lu Xiaoshan, used 3 skills almost without order. Can skills be used at the same time? No, because as long as it is in the game, you have to follow that basic rules of the game. When one skill is used, it is impossible to use another skill at the same time. However, can the skills be used almost at the same time? Yes. It is possible to use a skill and quickly switch to the next skill, or even quickly switch to the next skill of another hero. This allows players to burst out with great lethality in an instant, because although the duration of each skill is different, they all have one characteristic, that is, at the beginning, the skill damage is the greatest. Although the skill damage has a lot to do with the part of the opponent hit, the damage caused by the first skill is still a complete rule. Under normal circumstances, each skill is of course to seek to deliver the maximum output, but in the case of close combat, how to deliver the maximum output in the shortest time is also a key. The level of each player is reflected in these details. When Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan met, they exchanged 3 skills in almost the blink of an eye. 2 of them were cancelled due to confrontation, and the remaining one hit the opponent, but both sides dodged appropriately and were not hit by the opponent. Exchanging 3 skills in an instant is definitely the top level. After such a moment, even Lu Xiaoshan could not launch an attack again quickly. At this time, Daixing appeared beside Zheng Qi. As one of the top killers in the league, Daixing's ability to seize opportunities is of course first class. The timing of his appearance now, in the words of the martial arts novels of the past, is just when Zheng Qi's old strength has gone and his new strength has not yet been born. Generally speaking, in such a situation, no matter how awesome the person being attacked is, he will suffer a big loss. Daixing is also very confident. This time, he plans to take Zheng Qi away directly in one wave. Even if he can't take him away, at least he will let Zheng Qi's physical value drop to the bottom. Even if Su Jing can help Zheng Qi recover his physical energy immediately, such a large-scale recovery will affect Su Jing's subsequent endurance, which will reduce the recovery skills of Fifan players in other positions, thereby establishing Changfeng's overall advantage. They will not give Fifan much time to delay. Under Daixing's fierce attack, Zheng Qi could only step back. It looked very lively, which made the Changfeng fans in the stand start to cheer continuously. After all, Zheng Qi's current appearance looked very embarrassed. However, Daixing's inner feelings at this moment were completely different. His continuous attacks did seize the opportunity, and Zheng Qi was also beaten very embarrassed by him, but what was the reality? As a top assassin, Daixing certainly knew that the same skill would cause different damage when hitting different parts, and Zheng Qi had most of his skills, but with his operation, he couldn't hit Zheng Qi's vitals. The skills that could hit Zheng Qi were all taken down by Zheng Qi at a more capable position at a critical moment, and the physical energy taken away was greatly reduced. Zheng Qi chose to retreat only when faced with some unavoidable skills, and the distance he retreated was also very clever. He stopped immediately after avoiding the opponent's most lethal skills. Everyone knew this very well. After avoiding the most lethal skills, you can then withstand them. The time when Zheng Qi's old strength was gone and his new strength had not yet been born was nothing more than a few short seconds. Daixing had originally intended to reduce Zheng Qi's physical value to the dangerous level, but now he found that his series of attacks did not cause any problems, but only reduced Zheng Qi's physical value by half. What kind of combat ability is this? By using evasion and injury resistance, Daixing's offensive effect was almost weakened by half. At this time, Zheng Qi immediately launched a counterattack. Before he counterattacked, Su Jing only used one skill to restore his physical value to most of the state. Such a transfer would not interrupt Su Jing's skill endurance. Zheng Qi's counterattack was quite fierce. You should know that his nature is to seize the opponent's flaws and pursue them relentlessly. Daixing's attack just now was too fierce, which was equivalent to letting all his operations go. Now he has no time to return to defense, and it is also a time when the old strength is gone and the new strength is not yet born. Daixing did not suffer a big loss, that is mainly because Lu Xiaoshan also recovered at this time and quickly took over Zheng Qi's attack. Otherwise, Daixing would have suffered a loss from the boss. But even so, Changfeng's fans were speechless. The series of confrontations just now were actually completed in a very short time. From Zheng Qi and Lu Xiaoshan's head-on confrontation to Zheng Qi's counterattack against Daixing just now, it was only a little over 10 seconds. However, the strong ability that Zheng Qi showed in these 10 seconds was enough to open everyone's eyes. And now, he came back with vigor and entangled with Lu Xiaoshan. It seems that there is no problem in holding on for a few more rounds. Lu Xiaoshan was also extremely shocked at this moment. Although the time Zheng Qi recovered from the period and launched a counterattack against Daixing was almost the same as the time he recovered from the period and rescued Daixing, and Lu Xiaoshan even recovered a little earlier, what was the reality? During that period, Zheng Qi was dealing with Daixing's fierce attack, while Lu Xiaoshan could start to recover with peace of mind. Under such a confrontation, Lu Xiaoshan only recovered slightly earlier than Zheng Qi. Has Zheng Qi's level reached this point? Lu Xiaoshan was actually somewhat familiar with Zheng Qi. In the World Cup of Classical Football, the two sides had cooperated for such a long time. Lucian certainly knew that in addition to Zheng Qi's outstanding talent, his progress was also extremely fast. It was clear that he had only played classical football for 2 years, and even before the start of this year's World Cup, he was still a little behind Lucian. However, in almost every game of the World Cup, he was improving. In the final knockout round, he had unknowingly replaced Lucian and became the biggest thigh of the Overlord team. People with such talent will of course continue to improve in the game of the football era. Lucian had been mentally prepared for this, but he had never expected that under such circumstances, Zheng Qi could actually improve beyond his imagination. Being able to resist the attacks of himself and Daixing in turn showed that Zheng Qi's level had surpassed his. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to be able to handle the impact of the two of them with ease. Let's go together. Lucian did not continue to attack himself this time, but retreated slightly, waiting for Daixing to join him. The two of them took turns just now, wanting to solve Zheng Qi as soon as possible. Lucian first entangled Zheng Qi, and quickly consumed each other with him, and then let Daixing use his ability to seize opportunities to kill Zheng Qi in one fell swoop. This was the plan of Lucian and Daixing. Only in this way can the opponent be killed quickly in the first place. But Zheng Qi's outstanding performance just now proved that he would not be killed in such a situation, so now they can only go together and not give Zheng Qi a chance to breathe. Although this takes more time, it at least allows Zheng Qi to have no time to breathe. By killing Zheng Qi and then eliminating the rest of Fifan's players, Zheng will be able to break through the opponent's defense in a short period of time and score the key goal before the end of the game. Chapter 899. The last chance. The pressure created by two people attacking together will of course be much greater. However, in this case, it is impossible to unexpectedly make the opponent lose the power of resistance instantly, which will delay some time. This is also the reason why Lucian and Daixing chose to take turns at the beginning. However, the level shown by Zheng Qi made them know that it was unlikely to kill Zheng Qi quickly. They could only suppress him head-on and depress Zheng Qi's activity space little by little, so that Zheng Qi could not delay that time of being killed. Two top attackers attacked Zheng Qi frantically. This would bring considerable pressure, but Zheng Qi's subsequent performance shocked everyone again. In the calculations of many top players, facing the oppression of Lucian and Daixing, Zheng Qi could only support for 30 seconds at most, with the support of Su Jing's recovery skills. In the attack of Lucian and Daixing, Zheng Qi began to retreat gradually, and relieved the pressure brought by the opponent's attack by retreating, but the distance of retreat was limited after all. After supporting for 15 seconds, Zheng Qi had retreated to the front of the passage and could no longer retreat. Su Jing was behind him, and Zheng Qi could only fight to the death. At most 15 seconds, Zheng Qi will die. Many god-level players, including the Li Qings, made such a judgment at the same time. However, after 10 seconds, everyone was speechless. Because Zheng Qi had supported until now, he was still able to handle it with ease. Looking at the speed at which his physical value decreased, let alone 5 seconds later, even if it came to another 30 seconds, he could hold on. And the reason why he could do this was also seen by all good players. It was still operation. Most of the time, Zheng Qi only slightly interfered with the attacks of Lucian and Daixing, and then shook his body, using his non-vital parts to bear the damage brought by the opponent. And for the kind of fatal and unavoidable attacks, he began to use skills to block them. Such operations require a very precise level, but Zheng Qi did it very well. So in this way, although Zheng Qi's physical value was constantly decreasing, it had always been a small decrease, and never a large decrease. Su Jing only needed to throw a recovery skill to Zheng Qi every now and then to prevent Zheng Qi from dying directly. Such an operation made everyone speechless. Obviously, this was not only because of Zheng Qi's awesome operation, but also because his attribute points played a key role. From the damage caused by Lucian and Daixing, those top players could calculate that Zheng Qi had not fallen after receiving such damage, which meant that he must have added 200 attribute points to his physique to achieve such an effect. How high are this person's attribute points? More than 1,000. That's for sure. The question is how many 1,000. Zheng Qi did not hide his level under such circumstances, but in previous competitions, he had never added so many points to his physique, because in the competition, instead of letting the physique be full, it is better to strengthen more effective attributes such as speed and strength to bring more output. Because even if it is 200 points of physique, it is only 2,000 attribute points. Such attribute points will not allow you to survive longer if you are really targeted by the opponent. But in such a special situation, Zheng Qi added his physique to the full points, but achieved excellent results. This is the killer that Zheng Qi and Fifan have hidden until now. Zheng Qi's response at this time has been guessed by Fifen before the game started, so Zheng Qi will adopt such an attribute point mode. 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye. 1 minute has passed since the attack was launched. There is really not much time left for Zheng Qi. Lu Xiaoshan still remained calm. Zheng Qi's performance during this period was surprising. In fact, in terms of operation, he has already exerted his limit. In Lu Xiaoshan's opinion, Zheng Qi's operation level has surpassed Shinryu Fei by 1 level, but he is just on par with himself, and there is no obvious advantage. Although at this level, he can still surpass the first line, which is enough to prove Zheng Qi's excellence. Relying on training and hard work, he may be able to reach the top level. However, at such a top level, he can still surpass the first line and reach Lu Xiaoshan's height, which is not only talent, hard work and correct training. That requires superhuman talent, superhuman hard work, and training that never takes detours. Zheng Qi is indeed a peerless genius. His vision at the time was not wrong. You know, when Zheng Qi was recruiting players, Lu Xiaoshan thought that Zheng Qi wanted to recruit Zheng Qi first, not Shinryu Fei. Lu Xiaoshan's choice sometimes made Zheng Qi's top management feel that although Lu Xiaoshan was a top player, he was also a human being after all. As a human being, he would have human flaws and problems. When choosing a new player, he chose Zheng Qi who could better assist him, instead of Shinryu Fei who had similar characteristics to him. Although after Shinryu Fei joined Zheng Qi, Lu Xiaoshan also supported him unconditionally, choosing to sacrifice his own space to shine and give Shinryu Fei enough space, and even in order to maintain his unstoppable momentum, he chose to accommodate Shinryu Fei in the game instead of letting Shinryu Fei, a newcomer, accommodate himself as a matter of course, but it still makes people feel that Lu Xiaoshan was a little selfish before. And now, facts have proved that Lu Xiaoshan's vision at the time was correct. Among the two outstanding young people, the best one is still Zheng Qi. At least in the performance at this moment, Zheng Qi has surpassed Shinryu Fei. Although there are not many who have surpassed him, this is the difference between ordinary top players and top players who can dominate an era. However, at this time, Lu Xiaoshan had no intention of boasting about how good his vision was. He just wanted to defeat the guy in front of him at this time. Lu Xiaoshan's mind turned rapidly, many times. Some operations and tactics that seem incredible to people are not prepared in advance, but the judgments and choices made by the players when they are on the scene through the feeling of the game and the intuition of tactics. This is the most beautiful moment of the game. It is completely unpredictable and cannot be copied. Zheng Qi's attributes are sufficient to increase his physical fitness. In this case, it would be very difficult to take him away in one wave. After all, no matter how powerful the skills are, Zheng Qi, who always maintains a physical fitness of 1,400 to 1,500 points, can't be taken away in one wave. If it were another player, Lu Xiaoshan would still have a lot of confidence, but it was difficult to face Zheng Qi. After all, there is a big difference between skills hitting vital parts and non-vital parts. Players like Zheng Qi, even if they're controlled, can dodge at that moment and avoid the most vital parts. This is the instinctive operation level of a god-level player, which is why in professional games, other substitutes may die many times in a game, while core players often die only a few times, or even not once. It is because they can save their lives very well. The more time they are on the field, the more help they can provide to the entire team. The general god-level players have such strong ability to save their lives, let alone Zheng Qi. You know, from last year to this year, in these 2 seasons, although this season has not yet ended, the number of times Zheng Qi died in the game is the least in the entire league. Last season, because he had to be on the front line against opponents many times, Zheng Qi died a little more often, but in this season, Zheng Qi is more elusive on the field. His number of kills and the number of times he broke the deadlock have increased a lot compared to last season, but the number of times he was killed has decreased a lot. In addition to his game style, he can do this because he is better at saving his life. This has been shown in the confrontation just now. After a hard fight with Lu Xiaoshan, facing Dai Xing's attack, he still relied on dodging vital attacks and occasional retreats, so that he only lost half of his physical value in a retreat that would have lost almost all of his physical value. This is an achievement achieved under the assault of Dai Xing, one of the 3 killers in the league. Apart from anything else, Zheng Qi just kept shifting his movements, dodging at the moment when Dai Xing's skills were close to his body, and greatly reducing the damage he suffered. Ordinary god-level players can't do it. This requires incomparable sharpness and feeling. Zheng Qi can do this, which keeps his physical value at a relatively safe number. This is why he never dies on the court. If you want to take away so much physical value in one breath, there is only one skill after thinking about it. Zheng Qi's big move, eagle-like and wolf-like. Hit the opponent continuously, accumulate the damage, and then take away the opponent's physical value in one wave. This move has always been considered the most special one. After all, if you want to take away an opponent in one move, apart from Zheng Qi's ultimate move of assassinating clean, only Eagle Vision and Wolf Guard can take away an opponent with nearly full health in one wave. 13 consecutive attacks at different positions, and then the damage is superimposed and bursts out. No matter how much physical energy is, it will be taken away in one wave. However, this is only a theoretical achievement, because the opponent is not a fool. As long as you dodge any attack, you can prevent such damage from bursting out. Only against some monsters can such an effect be achieved. However, at this moment, Lu Xiaoshan seems to be able to think of only this. One-on-one, he is not sure, but by his side, at this time, there is Daixing to help him. In this case, there is a chance that Zheng Qi cannot dodge and be taken away by him in one wave. This is Chen Feng's last chance. Chapter 900. Takedown. Lu Xiaoshan just said one sentence in the team channel, and Daixing immediately understood what he meant. This is the tacit understanding between top players. Although Daixing and Lu Xiaoshan have only been teammates for less than a year, they were opponents before, but they had fought together in the same league for 5 or 6 years. What is the saying that has become very cliché? The one who knows you best may not be your friend, but your enemy. Although Daixing did not seem to be qualified to be Lu Xiaoshan's opponent before, after all, he was 2 or 3 years younger than Lu Xiaoshan. Although Lu Xiaoshan did not debut very early, Daixing was already well known in the league when he debuted. However, compared with Lu Xiaoshan who debuted later and then suddenly rose like a comet, Daixing's rise was very stable. He entered the first team at the age of 17, played as a substitute for more than a year, and gradually became a main player. Then, because he was good at finding opportunities to kill opponents, he received more attention. In addition, his own character attribute points were also excellent. In his 4th year in the league, he ranked among the ranks of god-level players and began to challenge the status of the king of killers. After he became the main force in the league, Lu Xiaoshan began to fight in the league. But when he became a god-level player, Lu Xiaoshan had already begun to dominate the league, and even Li Qing's began to rise. Sometimes people really can't be compared with others. Daixing considered himself a genius, and his rise was not slow, but compared with Lu Xiaoshan, it was too far behind. In the next few years, Daixing has been supporting Xiu. As the only top player of Xiu, he is also very glorious. He can show his level against any team. Even when facing Chen Feng, he always performs very well, even though he knows deep in his heart that there is still a gap between him and Lu Xiaoshan. Maybe it is because he knows that there is a gap that he always performs better when facing Lu Xiaoshan. Every god-level player in the league is like this. They all know that they are not opponents of Lu Xiaoshan or Li Qing's, but they always fully display their level when facing these two guys. Every team has a core, but not every team has a god-level player. Generally speaking, in the game, the performance of the god-level players may not be much better than that of the core players. However, when facing opponents like Lu Xiaoshan and Li Qing's, the performance of the god-level players will show their value. So Daixing is also very familiar with Lu Xiaoshan. After listening to Lu Xiaoshan's words, Daixing knew what he should do. Find an opportunity to imprison Zheng Qi so that Lu Xiaoshan can deal instant damage and take away this annoying guy. Zheng Qi resisted them for a minute in a row, which made Daixing feel very embarrassed. If he continued, he would only lose face. Of course, it is also a very difficult thing to imprison Zheng Qi. In the football era, there is no skill that can completely imprison the opponent. Even if you are hit by a disruptive skill, you will only have slow movements and slow reactions. For top players, in such a situation, they can still rely on their own reactions and predictions to avoid the opponent's attacks on their vital points. This operation is difficult to say, but it is not particularly difficult. God-level players often surpass ordinary players in this kind of micro-operation. But if you really want to make the opponent unable to move, there are still ways. In the game, there will be many negative states. Some negative states are achieved through skills, such as continuous bleeding, slow movement, etc. But some negative states can only be achieved by operation. For example, knockback, such as stiffness. In reality, stiffness is impossible to appear after the opponent hits. However, in the game, the two sides collide with force. Under the mutual reaction force, both sides will be stiff at the same time. Although the stiffness time is very short, often less than 1 second, but in such a short time, it is enough for Lu Xiaoshan to complete a set of Eagle Vision and Wolf Guard. As the first person in the alliance, Lu Xiaoshen's operation level is of course unquestionable. There are no more than 5 people in the entire alliance who can accurately perform Eagle Vision and Wolf Guard 13 strike in 1 second, but Lu Xiaoshen is definitely one of them. Now is the time when Daixing needs to help Lu Xiaoshen. Such tactical intentions certainly could not be detected by Zheng Qi in advance. Although with Zheng Qi's level, he should be able to estimate what operations Lu Xiaoshen and Daixing could use at this moment, but facing the fierce attack of 2 top players, he might not be able to react. Lu Xiaoshen and Daixing continued to attack, while Zheng Qi continued to defend the position and fought to the death. After Lu Xiaoshen and Zheng Qi exchanged a skill, Daixing rushed up from the side very abruptly. The timing of this rush was quite good. It was just when the 2 sides had just exchanged skills. The effect of the skill blocked Zheng Qi's sight, which made him see Daixing rushing out from the light and shadow effect. There was no room for him to dodge. The next moment, Daixing crashed into Zheng Qi. Zheng Qi had no way to avoid it, and the 2 sides could only collide. The strength points of both sides were not weak. In such a collision, both sides would inevitably fall into an inevitable stiffness. Lu Xiaoshen, who should have retreated at this moment, forcibly controlled his direction of advance, and rushed forward quickly, and instantly came to Zheng Qi's side. The next moment, the Eagle Vision Wolf Guardian's big move burst out in an instant. 13 shots, accurately hitting Zheng Qi's 13 vital parts, not a single point off. This is the level and strength of a top attacker. 13 shots, all hitting the right vital parts, in less than a second, Lu Xiaoshen completed such an operation. This is an operation that the audience can hardly see clearly, but they can see the level of Lu Xiaoshen's operation from the result. This is Lu Xiaoshen's peak operation. Compared to his peak, his operation this time can also be said to be top-notch and beautiful. This is Lu Xiaoshen's top operation alone. In terms of operation level, there are still 2 or 3 people in the entire league who can compete with him, but at this moment, the level he showed is the level that only he can play. Even if Zheng Qi used the same skill at the time and killed 6 residual blood players with 1 move, it was not as shocking as this operation. When Lu Xiaoshen launched the attack, Zheng Qi still had almost half of his physical energy left. In real data, that was more than 1,400 points of physical energy. With such a strong physical energy, even if he was hit by Zheng Qi's ultimate move, he might still be able to escape successfully. After all, if it was an ordinary player, their strength and lethality were not enough. Even if they used the ultimate move to stab clean, the effect would not be as good as that of the top players. After all, in the football era, the lethality of skills is a very complicated calculation process. The position and timing of the shot, the attributes of the player, the level of operation, the part of the hit, the opponent's reaction, avoidance and attribute advantages, all have many calculation possibilities. With Zheng Qi's physical energy and the attribute points added to the attributes such as strength reaction, it is really possible to escape from the ultimate move of stabbing keen. But what about now? Facing Lu Xiaoshen's perfect operation, his physical energy value suddenly dropped to the bottom in a flash, just before you could blink. Then, white light appeared on Zheng Qi's body and he was sent off the field. Lu Xiaoshen killed Zheng Qi in seconds. The Chang'an fans in the stands began to shout wildly. It must be said that under such circumstances, such a kill is undoubtedly an extremely inspiring thing. However, there was no smile on Lu Xiaoshen's face. Even though he completed such a wonderful attack without any mistakes. You must know that in the game, wonderful operations and performance are not the ultimate goal, but only means. What is the ultimate goal? It is to complete the tactical goal, so that you can win. Lu Xiaoshen wants to kill Zheng Qi in order to win and defeat Fifan's defensor, not to kill Zheng Qi itself. Killing Zheng Qi is one of the necessary conditions for victory, but it is not victory. At the same time as he killed Zheng Qi, the other players of Chang'an were instantly in trouble. Because before Daixing and Zheng Qi collided, Zheng Qi had thrown a long-range skill Chan Yachun's second skill, a chaotic arrow. This arrow accurately hit Feng Tu, who was entangled with Shinrao Fei. Originally, such a skill would not bring much lethality. After all, the feature of automatic hit is the most important, and the lethality will naturally be reduced. Otherwise, such a skill would be too buggy. Such a thing would not happen in the era of balanced football. However, when Zheng Qi hit Feng Tu from a long distance, Feng Tu's physical value was close to the danger line and he was about to retrieve to slow down. After being hit by the arrow, he couldn't help but stiffen and couldn't retreat. Shinrao Fei, who followed up, made a series of fierce attacks and sent him out of the field. Before, Zheng was 7 against 5, which actually didn't have much advantage, because Fifan's 5 people were all top players, and there was enough support behind them, which was just a stalemate. Now, Zheng 2 left the field, and Fifan instantly took an absolute advantage. While Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing killed Zheng Qi, Shen Ruofei turned around to assist Liu Shibo and killed Zhuo's Jinjiang. Then, before Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing came to assist, he and Liu Shibo assisted Bin Shikai to kill Liu Xing. Fifan killed 1 core, but Zheng killed 3 main players. Their disadvantage on the field was reversed in an instant, and they took advantage. Even if Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing came over now and started to attack with several other Zheng players, they were absolutely sure that they could continue to support for a long time. This was indeed the case. In the next minute, Zheng could no longer make any progress. Although they killed Li Gurui and Wang Yuanfen under the leadership of Lu Xiaoxun and Daixing, at this time, Zheng Qi had also returned to the field. The remaining 10 seconds of the game passed in a flash, and Fifan maintained their 1-goal lead and finally won the game. Fin DS capture no much as great as Pelaga hasta el final. No se olviden de like busgasms contenido exclusivo y exeo inmediato. Suscríbete nuestro Patreon. Recuerda, cada like, suscripción no dona que nos anima a continuar. Gracias a todos nos vemos en el próximo video.